Here's the truth. Nobody wants to hear you can tell someone exactly who you are on day one, lay every boundary on the table, and they'll still act blindsided when you refuse to light yourself on fire to keep their family warm. I told my husband I never wanted children. He said he understood. Turns out he was just waiting for the right moment to pretend that conversation never happened. So when his daughter demanded I quit my career to raise her baby full-time and he backed her up like I was the unreasonable one, I learned something brutal about the man I married. I'm a 38-year-old woman with no kids by choice. My husband is Sam, 47, a devoted father whose devotion has no off switch. His daughter is Leah, 25, a new mom still chasing a deadbeat ex named Derek who vanished. The second things got real. Sam and I met at a conference in Denver 4 years ago. He was charming, graying at the temples, and honest about his life. Divorced, one daughter, still healing from losing his first wife to cancer when Leah was 14. I was honest too. Over our second dinner before he even reached for the check, I told him plainly, I don't want children. Not eventually. Not under the right circumstances. Not ever. He set his fork down, looked me in the eye and said, I already have my kid. I'm not looking for another one. That sentence was the foundation of everything. We built a marriage on it. What I didn't fully understand at the time was that I already have my kid didn't mean what I thought it meant. It didn't mean his chapter of active parenting was closed. It meant Leah was the son, and everything else, including me, was expected to orbit. I liked Leah in the beginning. She was guarded, which I respected. She didn't call me mom, which I preferred. We had a workable distance. I came to her college graduation. She came to our wedding. We exchanged birthday texts that were polite and brief. It wasn't warm, but it was functional, and I thought functional was enough. Then Derek happened. Derek was the kind of man who makes promises in bed and breaks them in daylight. Leah fell for him catastrophically, moved in after 3 months, got pregnant after 7, and was alone by month 9. He didn't even have the decency to leave a note. Just stopped answering his phone one Tuesday and never started again. Sam drove 4 hours to pack up her apartment. He moved her into our guest room. He converted the office into a nursery. I didn't object to any of it. She was in crisis, and I understood that family shows up during crisis. I helped paint the nursery walls. I assembled the crib with an Allen wrench and a YouTube tutorial. I drove her to 2 of her prenatal appointments when Sam had work conflicts. But I never agreed to become a mother. Not once. The baby came a boy, Caleb, and for the first 12 weeks, the house was a fog of feedings and crying, and Sam hovering over Leah like she might shatter. I gave them space. I picked up groceries. I kept the house running. I figured Leah would stabilize, find childcare, go back to work, and eventually get her own place. Instead, her maternity leave ended, and the real nightmare began. It started as a suggestion over dinner. Leah was bouncing Caleb on her knee, and Sam cleared his throat the way he does when he's rehearsed something. We've been talking, he said, and we think it makes the most sense if you stayed home with Caleb while Leah goes back to work. I actually laughed. Not cruelly, I genuinely thought it was a joke. Nobody else laughed. I'm not quitting my job, Sam. It wouldn't be quitting, it'd be a pause. A pause. From my career to raise someone else's child. Leah's face crumpled immediately. Someone else's child. He's your Times grandson, asterisk. He's not my grandson, Leah. I care about him, but I'm not his grandmother. I'm your father's wife. The silence that followed had weight. Sam's jaw tightened. Leah pulled Caleb closer like I'd threatened him. Over the next 2 weeks, I offered every alternative I could think of. Daycare, too impersonal, he's too young. A nanny, a stranger. Raising my baby, absolutely not. Reduced hours for Leah, I just got this position, I can't go part-time. I even suggested Sam cut back his own schedule since he worked remotely 3 days a week. He looked at me like I'd suggested he set the house on fire. I brought up child support. Derek had legal obligations whether he wanted them or not. That's when the real picture came into focus. Leah's eyes went glassy and she shook her head so fast it was almost a tremor. I'm not dragging Derek through court. Leah, he owes. He's going through stuff. He'll come back when he's ready. She still loved him. She was still waiting. Filing for child support would mean admitting Derek wasn't coming home, and she couldn't do that. Every practical solution I offered collapsed against the same wall, Leah's fantasy that her life would reassemble itself around a man who had already proven he didn't want to be in it. And Sam enabled every inch of it. He wouldn't push Leah on child support because it upset her. He wouldn't consider a nanny because Leah didn't want one. He wouldn't reduce his own hours because, and he actually said this, someone has to keep this household funded. The implication was suffocating. Asterisk. Someone times, meaning him. My salary apparently was optional. Disposable. A hobby that could be shelved. Then came the night Leah played her ace. We were arguing in the kitchen, Sam and I voices low but sharp, when Leah appeared in the doorway holding Caleb against her shoulder. You know what? Her voice was trembling theatrical. If my mom were alive, she would have had my back. She wouldn't have even had to be asked. Sam's entire body shifted toward his daughter. His eyes went soft and wet. And just like that, I was no longer his wife in that room. I was the woman standing where his dead ex-wife should have been failing to fill a ghost's shoes. 3 days later, Sam sat me down with a plan he'd written on a legal pad. I stared at the yellow paper, at his handwriting, at the numbers that erased me completely, and I realized this was never a conversation. It was a sentencing. The legal pad had 3 columns: expenses, timeline, my role. Under expenses, Sam had listed mortgage, utilities, groceries, Caleb's pediatric visits, diapers, formula. My name appeared nowhere in the expense column because I wasn't an expense. I was a solution times expenses. Under timeline, return to workforce when Caleb enters pre-K, age 4 to 5. 4 to 5 years. Written in his neat engineer's print like it was a project milestone. Under my role, a single line: full-time caregiver, household management. No retirement contributions. No savings plan. No income replacement. No acknowledgement that I had a 401k I'd been building for 16 years, a senior analyst position I'd fought for through 2 company mergers, or a professional identity that existed before Sam's daughter decided a stranger shouldn't raise her baby, but her stepmother could. This is the plan, he said. Not times A, times plan. Asterisk. The times plan. Where's my retirement in this, Sam? We'll figure that out later. Later when I'm 43 with a 5-year gap on my resume and no savings. You're being dramatic. I'm being times a mathematical asterisk. Show me where I exist on this page. He tapped the legal pad. You exist right here. With this family. That's where you exist. That's not a financial plan. That's a guilt trip formatted in columns. His hand came down flat on the table. I have bent over backward to make you feel included in this family. Leah is struggling. Caleb needs stability. And you're sitting here counting your retirement like some what? Say it. He didn't. He didn't have to. The word was already in the room. Asterisk. Selfish. Asterisk. It had been circling for weeks and now it landed. I stood up. My chair scraped the tile. I told you in Denver. Before you paid for dinner. Before you kissed me. Before you proposed. I told you I would never be a mother. You said you understood. This isn't about being a mother. This is about being a decent human being. That sentence hit like a closed fist because it reframed everything. Every boundary I'd ever drawn wasn't a boundary anymore. It was evidence of indecency. My entire identity, the one he'd claimed to love, was now the prosecution's exhibit. I went upstairs. I pulled 2 suitcases from the closet. I started with the things that were unquestionably mine: closed documents, the jewelry my mother left me, my laptop, the framed photo of my parents' anniversary that I kept on my nightstand. It took 40 minutes. That's how long it takes to dismantle 4 years of marriage when you never owned the house. Sam appeared in the doorway when I was zipping the second suitcase. He watched me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not regret exactly. More like confusion. The confusion of a man who had genuinely believed the walls would hold. You're really doing this, he said. Over babysitting. I almost screamed. I swallowed it. You wrote a plan where I don't exist, Sam. You handed me a piece of paper that erases my career, my savings, my future, and my autonomy, and you called it times babysitting asterisk. Leah appeared behind him. Caleb was asleep in her arms. She looked at the suitcases and her lip curled not with sadness, but with vindication. Like she'd been waiting for this. Like my leaving proved what she'd always suspected, that I was never really family. I hope you can live with yourself, she said quietly. I hope you learn to live without a safety net, I said back. Because your father won't be here forever, Leah. And Derek isn't coming back. And at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to be responsible for yourself and your child. And no one, not a nanny, not your dad, not the ghost of your mother, is going to do it for you. Her face went white. Sam stepped between us like I'd raised a hand. Get out, he said. I carried my own suitcases down the stairs. Nobody helped. I loaded my car in the dark. The porch light didn't come on. I drove to a hotel off the interstate and sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like industrial detergent. My phone lit up twice. Once from Sam Times. You showed your true colors tonight. Asterisk. Once from Leah. In a group text that included Sam's sister Times. She abandoned us. Caleb's own step-grandmother walked out because she couldn't be bothered. Asterisk. Step-grandmother. A title I never claimed applied retroactively to maximize the betrayal narrative. I didn't respond to either message. Here's what I keep turning over alone in that room, staring at the parking lot, lights bleeding through thin curtains. Sam didn't lie to me in Denver. He believed what he said. He genuinely thought his parenting chapter was closed. But belief isn't the same as commitment. When Leah needed something that required times, my time sacrifice, his belief evaporated like it had never been spoken. The foundation we built our marriage on was made of his convenience, and the moment it became inconvenient, he jackhammered through it without flinching. It seems unrealistic that Leah thought she could have a child without it impacting her career at least a little. Although it's hard for new mothers, it might take time for her to realize Caleb will be loved with or without a nanny. With everything Sam was already doing, converting rooms, covering costs, absorbing her life into his, it seemed staggering that she'd demand more. But Sam made it possible by making it easy. He enabled every refusal, cushioned every consequence, until Leah had no reason to develop the ability to be responsible for herself or her son. And that will not bode well for her down the road. Because Sam is 67% of her support system, and only God knows how long that lasts. Hopefully a very long time. But one never knows. I made the best decision I could for myself. I'm not sure anyone else in that house will understand that. Maybe ever. But I drove away with my name intact, my career intact, and the quiet, brutal clarity of a woman who told the truth on the first date and was punished for it 4 years later. My lawyer called back the next morning. The marriage on paper was clean. No shared property, no children, no claim. Exactly what I'd walked in with. Exactly what I'd warned him about. She spent 4 years trying to be number one, and she got her wish, just not the ranking she wanted. By graduation, she was first on a list. Nobody wants to top the person. Literally no one in our class could stand to be around. So here's the short version. My best friend turned into my worst enemy the moment I outranked her, and she went nuclear fabricating rumors about me sleeping with a professor, sabotaging her own boyfriend's grades so she could beat him, and burning every bridge in our college. She thought she was playing chess. She was playing herself. I'm a 21-year-old girl who just wanted to study in peace. Shay was my ride-or-die best friend turned full-time saboteur. Tom's our class topper who Shay started dating not because she liked him but because she wanted to destroy him from the inside. Professor Arjun is a young professor whose career Shay nearly ended with a lie. And Rohan is my cousin, the guy who accidentally connected all the dots. Buckle up because this one gets ugly. Let me take you back to first year because that's where the rot started even if it looked like friendship at the time. Shay and I met during orientation week, bonded over the fact that we were both the kind of psychotic that color-coded our notes before the first lecture had even happened. She had this energy, magnetic intense, the kind of girl who'd grab your arm during a conversation and make you feel like you were the only person in the room. We became inseparable within days. Studied together, ate together, dissected every professor's grading rubric like it was a treasure map. And here's the thing, it worked. First semester, we both placed in the top 10. Second semester, top 5. We'd quiz each other at midnight, share resources, split textbook costs. I genuinely believed I'd found my person. The kind of friend you build your entire college experience around. The cracks didn't show until third semester rankings dropped. I placed second. Shay placed 7th. And I swear I watched something behind her eyes just switch off. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't even acknowledge it. When I texted her that night times, dude, we both killed it. Let's celebrate time she left me on red. The next morning, she walked past me in the corridor like I was furniture. No nod, no eye contact. Nothing. I told myself she was having a bad day. Maybe family stuff. Maybe she was disappointed in her own rank and needed space. I gave her a week. That week turned into a month. The month turned into the rest of the semester. She didn't just distance herself, she times replaced times me, surgically. Within weeks, she'd attached herself to Tom, our class topper, the guy who'd held the number one spot since first semester like it was his birthright. Suddenly, they were studying together, sitting together, sharing notes in a way that felt uncomfortably familiar. Like she'd taken our entire friendship blueprint and carbon copied it onto someone more useful. I'd be lying if I said it didn't gut me, but I swallowed it. Kept my head down, studied harder. Fourth semester rolled around and I climbed to first. Tom dropped to second. Shay hovered around 5th. That's when things went from cold to radioactive. It started as a whisper. A classmate I barely knew pulled me aside after a lecture and asked, with this weird half smile, "So, you and Professor Arjun, huh?" My stomach dropped. What? People are saying you guys are like a thing. That's how you're topping. I almost laughed. Professor Arjun was 28 engaged, and the only reason I even knew him outside class was because he was friends with my cousin Rohan. They'd gone to the same university. He'd come over for dinner at Rohan's place once while I was there, and we talked about coursework for maybe 15 minutes. That was it. The entire basis of whatever this was. Who's saying this? I asked. She shrugged. Wouldn't give me a name, but I didn't need one. I already knew. The rumor metastasized fast. Within 2 weeks, it wasn't just that I was sleeping with a professor, it was that he'd leaked exam papers to me, that my grades were manufactured, that the whole thing was transactional. I'd walk into class and conversations would die. Group project invitations dried up. A faculty member I respected started treating me with this stiff formal distance that made my skin crawl. And Professor Arjun God, his situation was worse. He told Rohan later that colleagues had started giving him looks. His department head made a pointed comment about maintaining professional boundaries. His fiancée heard a version of the rumor from someone's sister who went to our college. The man was fighting fires in every direction, and he hadn't done a single thing wrong. Meanwhile, Shay and Tom were officially a thing. She used to call Tom to her house asking him to teach her before exams, and that's how they started dating each other. At least that's the version that circulated. Some people also said she was involved with one of the junior boys. I took all this gossip with a pinch of salt, but I was betting the second one to be false. You never know, though. After returning from college one day, I visited Rohan. Gave him the hot gossip going around campus. He said the last time he'd met Professor Arjun, the professor had mentioned something of this sort was happening. The rumors, the professional fallout, all of it. We both had a good laugh, the dark kind, the kind where you're actually furious but don't know what else to do with it. Then Rohan called the professor right there, put him on speaker, and asked him what had happened in the dean's office. And what Professor Arjun said next made my blood go cold. He'd filed a formal complaint. The dean had launched an investigation. And every single thread, every whisper, every accusation, every poisoned conversation traced back to one source. Shay had been called in. She'd been formally warned. And she was times furious, asterisk. I sat in Rohan's living room phone, still on speaker, and felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something harder. Something patient. Because I knew Shay. And I knew a formal warning wouldn't stop her. It would only make her more careful about who she destroyed next. I just didn't realize Tom was already mid-destruction and that I'd be the one to stumble onto the evidence. The stairwell thing happened on a Thursday. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't looking for anything. Fifth semester had settled into a rhythm head, down notes, organized library until closing. I'd stopped thinking about Shay the way you stop thinking about a toothache after the nerve dies. She existed in my periphery, a shape I'd learned to navigate around. I'd stayed late to return a reference book to the department office on the 3rd floor. The building was mostly empty that post. 5 p.m. quiet where your footsteps echo too loud and the fluorescent lights buzz like they're personally offended you're still there. I took the back stairwell because the elevator was broken again, and I was 2 flights down when I heard it. Laughter. Low, breathy. Then a voice I'd recognize in my sleep honestly thinks I'm with him because I times like times him. It's pathetic. I froze. My hand tightened on the railing. Then a male voice, younger, unfamiliar. So what? You're just going to keep stringing him along until finals. Shay's voice was casual, almost bored. He's already dropped to 4th this semester. By the time I'm done, he won't crack top 10. And the beautiful part, he thinks I'm times helping times him. I rearranged his entire study schedule, cut his library hours in half, convinced him group study with my friends was more productive than solo revision. A pause. The wet sound of a kiss. He's so desperate to keep me happy, he doesn't even notice his GPA bleeding out. The junior boy laughed. That's cold. That's strategy. My back was pressed flat against the wall. I wasn't breathing. My phone was already in my hand. I don't remember pulling it out. Muscle memory, maybe. Or something older, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment since the day she left me on red. I opened the voice recorder. Hit the red button. Held the phone low-angled toward the gap in the stairwell. What about that rumor thing, the boy asked. Didn't you almost get expelled? Asterisk. Warned asterisk. There's a difference. And it was worth it. She was getting too comfortable at the top. Someone had to remind her she's nobody. A beat. Besides, the professor thing was genius. 2 birds, 1 lie. Her reputation, times his career. I just didn't account for him actually going to the dean. She said it like she was reviewing a chess move that hadn't panned out. Clinical. Annoyed at the miscalculation, not the cruelty. They kissed again. I heard her murmur something about meeting later, his footsteps retreating down the stairs below me. I didn't move for 3 full minutes after the stairwell went silent. My thumb hovered over the stop button, and I watched the recording timer tick past 4 minutes 37 seconds. I saved it, backed it up to my drive. Then I walked home with my heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I didn't send it that night. I sat with it for 2 days, replaying it with earphones in, making sure every word was audible, making sure there was no ambiguity. Then I created a burner email, took me 20 minutes because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and sent the audio file to Tom with one line, "Times, you deserve to know who she actually is." Asterisk. What happened next I only heard secondhand, but I heard it from enough people that the picture was sharp. Tom listened to the recording. Then he went quiet for a day, that dangerous quiet that people who've been genuinely betrayed go through before the dam breaks. He confronted Shay. She denied it. He asked to see her phone. She refused. He grabbed it. The messages were worse than the recording. Conversations with 3 different people where she detailed her strategy for tanking his grades. Screenshots she'd sent to her school friends bragging about managing him. A group chat where she joked about how easy he was to manipulate because he was emotionally needy. Tom copied everything. Every message, every screenshot, every damning line. And he dropped it all into the class WhatsApp group at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I watched my phone light up with notification after notification. Opened the group, scrawled, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, just a vast flat calm like watching a building you'd already evacuated finally collapse. By morning, it was everywhere. Tom's mother called Shay. Then she called Shay's mother. I don't know exactly what was said, but a classmate who was at Tom's house that day told me his mother's voice carried through 2 closed doors and the phrase "raised a snake" was used more than once. Shay's mother apparently cried. Shay apparently didn't. The college farewell was 3 months later. By then, the social math had been done and the numbers were final. Shay arrived in a green sari, makeup, perfect posture, straight. She walked in like nothing had happened, and for about 10 minutes it almost worked. Then the photos started. Groups forming arms around shoulders, people pulling each other into frame. Nobody pulled Shay. She stood at the edge of clusters, half smiling, waiting for an invitation that never came. I watched her from across the hall. Not with satisfaction, with something closer to recognition. She'd spent 3 years engineering everyone else's isolation, and now she was standing inside the architecture she'd built, except she'd built it around herself. Tom was across the room laughing with friends, lighter than I'd seen him in a year. Professor. Arjun's name had been formally cleared. Rohan told me the fiancé situation had stabilized, that the engagement was back on track. My name sat at the top of the final rankings, and for the first time it felt clean. Shay left the farewell 40 minutes early. No goodbye. No scene. She just picked up her clutch and walked out through the side door while the rest of us were mid-group photo. Nobody noticed she'd gone. And honestly, that was the most devastating thing of all. Not anger, not confrontation, just absence. The complete, frictionless ease with which a room full of people continued without her. She'd spent years trying to be first. In the end, she wasn't even last. She just wasn't counted. My mother-in-law told me I disgraced her family's genetics by existing. At her husband's birthday party, in front of 40 relatives, while standing in a house I paid for. So here's the situation. My in-laws worship beauty like a religion, and I was their heresy. They lived rent-free in a home I bought, mocked me daily for my appearance, and when I finally asked for basic respect, they chose homelessness over apologizing. Then their golden child daughter dumped them in a care facility, and suddenly the ugly daughter-in-law was the only phone number worth dialing. I'm 31 female and apparently not pretty enough to deserve gratitude. My husband is Lior, 31, the only one in his family who sees people instead of faces. His mother is Vivian, 61, a woman who weaponized beauty her entire life. His father, Gerald, 65, enabled every cruel word. And his sister, Nadine, 34, played the devoted daughter right up until devotion got inconvenient. The thing about marrying into the Ashford family is that nobody warns you. The audition never ends. I met Lior at a hospital fundraiser. I was there because I had organized it. He was there because his company had donated imaging equipment. He asked me to dinner that night, and I said yes, because he looked at me like I was already enough. I didn't know then that his family operated on an entirely different metric. Vivienne had been a catalog model in the 80s, not famous regional. Department store circulars, the occasional magazine spread for a mid-tier jewelry brand. But she'd built an identity around it that calcified into doctrine. Beauty was virtue. Beauty was proof of worth. She passed this gospel to Nadine, who inherited her mother's cheekbones and wielded them like credentials, and to Lior, who quietly rejected it and never told anyone why. The first time I met Vivienne, she held my face between her manicured fingers and turned it side to side like she was inspecting fruit at a market. Interesting bone structure, she said, which I later learned was the most generous thing she'd ever say about me. We married small. Vivienne wore black. The house situation started 2 years before Gerald's birthday party. Lior and I had been married for a year when his parents' financial situation collapsed. Gerald's investment portfolio imploded bad bets on speculative real estate, compounded by pride that prevented him from pulling out early. They were about to lose their home. Vivienne called Lior sobbing, and Lior called me. Here's what people don't understand. I didn't help because I was naive. I helped because my own parents taught me that family means showing up even when it costs you. My father had worked 32 years in municipal water management, so my mother could stay home with my disabled brother. Sacrifice wasn't abstract to me. It was Tuesday. I had savings, substantial savings earmarked for my parents' retirement care. I redirected 85% of it toward the EMI on a house in Vivienne and Gerald's neighborhood, a house Lior had been about to sell because he couldn't carry the payments alone. I covered it. We transferred ownership to my name because that was the legal reality of who was paying. And then we moved his parents in, rent-free, no questions asked. For 3 years, I said nothing. Not when Vivienne rearranged the furniture I'd chosen and told guests it was her home. Not when Gerald referred to me as Lior's wife instead of my name at family dinners, as if naming me would make my presence too real. Not when Nadine visited every other Sunday and the three of them would sit in the living room speaking French, a language I don't speak, while I prepared food in the kitchen. I said nothing because I believed grace was cumulative, that eventually the sheer weight of my kindness would crack something open in them. I was wrong. Gerald's 65th birthday. 42 relatives packed into the house. My house and Vivienne had spent 3 weeks planning it like a state dinner. I'd funded the catering. I'd taken 2 days off work to help set up. I was carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres through the living room when I heard my name. Not my name. What Vivienne called me when she thought I couldn't hear. That weird-looking girl has disgraced this family's genetics just by existing. Look at her. Look at my son. People ask me if she's his Times assistant, asterisk. Laughter. Not all 42 relatives. But enough. I stopped walking. The tray trembled in my hands. Vivienne saw me and didn't flinch. She time-straightened, asterisk. Oh, good, you heard. Maybe now you'll understand why I keep asking Lior to reconsider. The room went silent. I set the tray down on the nearest table with a steadiness that surprised even me, and I walked out. Not dramatically. Not crying. I just left. I sat in my car for 40 minutes and stared at the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. That night, I told Lior I wanted the house back. He didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. He called a family meeting the following weekend and laid it out, apologized to my wife, or vacate her property. Gerald intervened first. You don't have to be her puppet for that. You married her, and now she is doing her duty. Don't put her on a pedestal. Lior snapped. His voice cracked with something I'd never heard from him. Not anger exactly, but the sound of a man realizing his father had never once seen him clearly. I times respect times her for everything, and you should also respect her because she has let you live in her house for the last 3 years and never said a word. The silence that followed was surgical. They were shocked to know the house was mine. Lior told them the truth, that he'd been about to sell when I saved it, paid for 85% of the EMI, and that he'd transferred ownership to my name because it was the right thing to do. They didn't apologize. They didn't even blink toward remorse. Lior asked them directly. Apologize to her. Vivienne's lip curled. A times simp, asterisk. My own son, a simp. It was her duty to help her husband at bad times. That's what wives do. That's not charity. That's obligation. Gerald nodded. Nadine on speakerphone said nothing, which was its own kind of vote. Then leave, Lior said quietly. And they did. Vivienne packed 3 suitcases, Gerald loaded them into Nadine's car, and they drove away from a house they didn't own, toward a daughter whose devotion had an expiration date they couldn't yet read. 2 weeks of silence followed. Then, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. The front window of the living room. A brick wrapped in a page torn from one of Vivienne's old modeling composites, her face at 23 jaw, tilted eyes full of a confidence that had curdled into cruelty over 40 years. No note. None was needed. Lior found me standing in the hallway in bare feet glass, glittering across the hardwood like scattered teeth. He pulled me back before I stepped forward. Don't move, he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had just understood something final. The police came. Filed a report. Insufficient evidence, they said, though. The composite page told its own story. 2 nights later, my father, who had been staying with us while we prepared his room, found Gerald standing on the sidewalk at dusk, staring at the house. Not approaching, just standing. My father, 71 years old with a replaced hip and a heart condition, went outside to ask if he needed something. Gerald told him his daughter had married above her station, and that the house would come back to the Ashfords one way or another. My father came inside and sat down at the kitchen table and didn't speak for an hour. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wet, and he said, "I didn't raise you to be treated like this." That sentence broke something in me that Vivian's public humiliation hadn't, because my father had never once complained. Not when he worked double shifts, not when my brother's care costs consumed every vacation they might have taken. He had absorbed difficulty like soil absorbs rain, quietly, completely. And now, this man who had earned every ounce of peace I was trying to give him was being terrorized on a sidewalk by someone whose mortgage I had paid. I filed for the restraining order the next morning. The renovation took 3 months. I gutted the bathroom on the ground floor and rebuilt it with grab bars, a walk-in shower, a seat. I widened the door frames. I installed a ramp at the side entrance. Every modification was a sentence in a language Vivian would never understand. Times, "This is what love looks like when it isn't performed for an audience." Asterisk. My father moved in on a Saturday. He stood in the doorway of his room and touched the wall like he was confirming it was real. "This is mine," he asked. "This is yours." He unpacked a single framed photo of my mother, gone 4 years now, and set it on the nightstand, and that was enough. That was the whole ceremony. Lior severed contact with his parents formally, not through a dramatic phone call, through a letter handwritten 3 paragraphs long. I didn't read it. He didn't offer, but when he sealed the envelope, his hands were steady and his jaw was set in a way that told me the decision had been made long before the pen touched paper. The boy who had quietly rejected his mother's gospel of beauty had finally said so out loud. A year passed. I learned what happened next, not from Lior, not from Vivienne or Gerald, but from a cousin of Lior's named Mark, who called one evening with the careful tone people use when delivering news they find both terrible and inevitable. Nadine had moved her parents into Cedar Brook Assisted Living. Not gradually, not after a medical event. She'd simply informed them one morning that the arrangement wasn't working. Her boyfriend didn't like the tension, her apartment was too small, their presence was affecting her energy. She drove them to the facility, signed the intake paperwork, and left before lunch. Mark said Gerald had stood in the lobby holding his suitcase looking at the door Nadine had walked through and hadn't moved for 15 minutes. I set the phone down after the call and sat with the information. I expected to feel vindicated. I searched for it, that hot, righteous bloom of times I told you so asterisk. It wasn't there. What I felt instead was a dull, familiar ache. The same ache I'd felt carrying that tray through the living room. The same ache I'd felt sitting in my car for 40 minutes. Not anger. Grief for people who couldn't stop destroying the bridges they stood on. Lior took it harder. He didn't cry. He went for a run at 10 o'clock at night and came back an hour later and stood in the shower until the water went cold. I didn't ask. I just left a towel on the hook in the hallway light on. Mark told me one more thing. Vivienne in the facility had been heard telling another resident that her son had been stolen by an ugly woman who tricked him and brought him to the streets, that the house had been taken from them, that they were victims of ingratitude. She was still performing, still curating the narrative. Even in a room she didn't choose surrounded by bodies that time, was softening and folding and diminishing the very process she'd spent a lifetime treating as moral failure she could not stop. Gerald, Mark said, mostly sat by the window. I asked Mark if they'd ever mentioned apologizing. He went quiet long enough that I knew the answer. No, he said, not once. I thanked him and hung up. That night I checked on my father. He was asleep in his accessible room in the house I'd paid for under a roof that nobody would take from him. My mother's photo watched from the nightstand. The grab bars gleamed faintly in the hallway light. I closed his door gently and stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob. The Ashfords had worshipped beauty like it was a savings account, something that would compound and protect them. But beauty doesn't compound. It spends. And when it's gone, what's left is only what you built with your hands and your choices and your willingness to love people who couldn't love you back. I had built this. They had built Cedar Brook. And the ugliest thing in the whole story was that they would never ever see it. My wife's brother moved in with us 3 months ago. Except he wasn't her brother, and he wasn't gay. And everything I thought I knew about the woman I married was a lie she'd been building since before our first date. So here's the short version. My wife convinced me to take in her supposedly disowned brother who was fresh out of rehab. Turns out he was actually her drug addict boyfriend she never broke up with, and she fabricated an entire family backstory, conservative parents, a painful estrangement, all of it just to keep this man close while married to me. I'm 32 male. My wife is Renee, 28, and genuinely one of the sharpest people I've ever met, which makes all of this worse. The man she moved into our home is Marco, 27, and her parents, Gerald and Diane, are the warm, lovely people Renee told me she'd been disowned by. They hadn't disowned anyone. They didn't even know Marco existed. Let me back up to where this started because the lie didn't begin with Marco moving in. It began on our second date. Renee told me about her family over cheap pasta at a place that doesn't exist anymore. She said her parents were deeply conservative, the kind who monitored her phone until she was 20, who refused to let her study out of state, who saw any deviation from their plan as betrayal. She said she'd clawed her way out, moved cities, cut contact, built herself from nothing. I remember sitting across from her thinking, times this woman is extraordinary. Asterisk. She told me her younger brother had come out as gay and her parents had disowned him completely, changed the locks, removed his photos. She said she'd tried to intervene and they'd cut her off too. She cried telling me this. Real tears, or what I believed were real tears. Her voice cracked in the right places. Her hands shook holding her wine glass. I fell in love with her courage before I fell in love with her. We married 14 months later. Her family didn't attend the wedding. I never questioned it. Why would I? The story was airtight. She had a stepbrother named Ryan from Gerald's first marriage, and she'd mentioned him exactly twice in passing enough to establish he existed, never enough for me to dig. I realize now she rationed every detail like someone managing inventory. Then 3 months ago, she told me her brother had finally gone to rehab. She said he'd reached out. She said he had nowhere to go. She asked if we could take him in temporarily, just until he got stable. His name was Marco. I said yes because I loved her, and because I thought I was helping someone she loved. Marco arrived with a duffel bag and the kind of exhaustion that made him look 10 years older than 27. He was polite, quiet, grateful. He called me man a lot. He slept on our pull-out couch and did the dishes without being asked. But things didn't sit right almost immediately. The first thing was the name. Renee's last name before marriage was Bellamy. Her parents were the Bellamys. Marco's last name, which I saw on a piece of mail that arrived for him in our mailbox the second week, was Reyes. I asked Renee about it casually. She said he'd legally changed it after the disownment wanted nothing to do with the family name. I nodded. Filed it away. The second thing was the whispering. They whispered constantly. In the kitchen when I was in the living room. On the balcony when I was showering. Once I came home early and they were sitting on the couch with a gap between them that looked recently manufactured, like two magnets pulled apart by a third hand. Marco stood up too fast. Renee smiled too wide. The third thing was that Marco never talked about the family. Not once. A man supposedly disowned by his parents, freshly sober, living in his sister's apartment, and he never mentioned them. Never said their names. Never expressed anger or grief or anything at all about the people who'd supposedly destroyed his life. I posted about it online. Anonymous, vague, just the broad strokes, wife's brother living with us, different surname, weird energy, constant private conversations. The responses split into two camps. Half said I was paranoid. The other half sent me links to threads I wish I'd never read. Wives who'd moved lovers into the family home disguised as cousins, brothers, old college friends. The playbook was almost standardized. Fabricate a sympathetic backstory. Exploit the husband's empathy. Install the other man under his roof. I read those threads for 4 hours. My hands were steady the entire time. Something in me had already known. I started building my case quietly. I asked Marco if he'd be willing to put together a resume so I could help him find work. He agreed. The resume listed his education, his work history, his full legal name, Marco Antonio Reyes. No mention of Bellamy. No name change documentation. The timeline of his employment showed continuous residence in a city 4 hours from Renee's hometown. He hadn't grown up where she grew up. He hadn't grown up in her family at all. That weekend, I told Renee I had a work trip near her hometown. I suggested she come along so we could visit her parents. I framed it casually already, knowing she'd refuse proximity to her actual parents. It was the one variable she couldn't control, so it was easier for her to say no. As expected, she said she was busy, but she kept asking me if I would be visiting her parents. I said no, I won't visit them alone. We can plan for the next time. In reality, I had no work trip. I went to her hometown only to meet her parents and uncover her truth. I don't want to get into the details of how I sourced their address. It was on her ID. So I went to their house and immediately told them not to reveal this to Renee because I was planning a surprise for her. Renee's birthday was around the corner a day after tomorrow. So I told them that I was arranging a surprise party for Renee and went there to invite them in person. They were pleased to receive me. Gerald shook my hand with both of his. Diane hugged me in the doorway. Their home was warm, cluttered with family photos and nothing times about these people, suggested the cold, controlling fundamentalists Renee had described. While speaking to them, I eventually opened up and told them that they don't seem conservative at all, not the way Renee had described. Gerald's face changed. Diane set down her tea. Conservative, Gerald said. We begged that girl to stay. I asked about their son. Gerald said, Ryan's in Seattle. We talk every Sunday. I asked carefully if they had another son, a younger one, named Marco. They looked at each other, then back at me, who Diane said slowly is Marco. I drove back to the hotel that night with every window down 80 miles an hour on an empty highway, and the only thought cycling through my head was this. Right now in my apartment, in the home I pay for, Renee and Marco are alone together. And they know exactly what they are to each other. Her birthday was in 2 days, and her parents had just accepted my invitation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger. Anger would have been simpler. I lay in that hotel bed running the math on every conversation, every tear, every perfectly rationed detail she'd fed me over 3 years, and what kept me awake was the precision. This wasn't impulsive. This was architecture. I drove home the next morning, one day before her birthday. Marco was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, and Renee was blow-drying her hair in the bathroom. Everything looked normal. Everything had always looked normal. That was the craft of it. How was the trip, she asked when I kissed her cheek. Productive, I said. Actually, I want to do something special for your birthday tomorrow. Stay home. I'll handle everything. She smiled. The same smile from our second date, the one I'd once mistaken for vulnerability. You don't have to do all that. I want to, I said. I really want to. I spent that day in a kind of surgical calm. I bought a cake. I ordered flowers. I texted Gerald and Diane the address and the time 6 o'clock come straight up the door would be open. Diane sent back a string of heart emojis and wrote that she couldn't wait to see her baby girl. I stared at that message for a long time. These people loved Renee. They had never stopped. She had invented their cruelty the way a novelist invents weather to set the scene for a character who doesn't exist. The morning of her birthday, Renee woke up happy. She stretched across the bed and pulled me toward her and said, 30 looks good on me, don't you think I told her it did? Marco knocked on the bedroom door and wished her happy birthday through the wood. She laughed. I watched the ease between them, the familiarity that I'd once read as sibling comfort, and I saw it clearly now. The way her voice softened half a register when she spoke to him. The way his knock was gentle, almost intimate, 2 taps instead of 3. I told her I was handling dinner. She should relax, get dressed up, enjoy the day. She spent the afternoon doing her makeup while Marco sat on the couch scrolling his phone. At one point I walked past and he looked up at me with those tired eyes and said, "This is really cool of you, man." "Family's important," I said. He nodded. He had no idea what he was nodding to. By 5:30, Renee was in a green dress, her hair pinned up, standing in the kitchen, finishing a salad she'd insisted on making because she said she couldn't just contribute nothing. Marco had changed into a clean shirt. The apartment smelled like garlic and candle wax and the ordinary machinery of a life that had never been real. At 5:58, my phone buzzed. Gerald times. We're in the lobby. Asterisk. I told Renee I'd forgotten something in the car and went downstairs. Gerald was wearing a blazer. Diane was holding a wrapped gift with a bow that looked like she'd spent an hour on it. I shook Gerald's hand, hugged Diane, and led them to the elevator. "She's going to be so surprised," Diane whispered. "Yes," I said. "She is." I opened the apartment door and stepped aside. Diane walked in first. Then Gerald. The hallway opens directly into the kitchen and living room, one continuous space, and Renee was standing at the counter with a knife in one hand and a tomato in the other, and Marco was 3 feet away leaning against the fridge. Diane said, "Baby?" Renee's head turned. The knife stopped. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes went from her mother to her father to me, and I watched the blood leave her face in real time like someone had pulled a plug at the base of her throat. Gerald stepped forward, arms open, and then he saw Marco. He stopped. His arms lowered. "What are you doing here?" Gerald said. Not to Renee, to Marco. Marco straightened. His mouth opened. Closed. "You know each other," I said. I already knew, but I needed the room to hear it. "That's Marco Reyes," Gerald said, his voice flattening into something I hadn't heard from him before. "He's the reason we almost lost our daughter." Renee set the knife down. Her hands were shaking. "Dad, let me..." He's been living here, I said, for 3 months. Renee told me he was your son, that you disowned him for being gay. The silence that followed had texture. Diane's gift hit the floor. Gerald turned to Renee with an expression I can only describe as a man watching something he built catch fire. Oh, I said Ryan didn't come. It would have made things easier, isn't it? Renee flinched, like I'd struck her. Gerald crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, grabbed Marco by the collar of his clean shirt, and dragged him toward the door. Marco didn't resist. He went limp the way someone goes limp when they've always known this moment was coming. Gerald shoved him into the hallway and pointed at the elevator and said something quiet I couldn't hear, and Marco walked away without looking back. Diane was crying. Renee was standing in her green birthday dress in the kitchen she'd been cooking in 2 minutes ago, and she looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her without a story prepared. How long? She whispered. Long enough, I said. The divorce took 11 weeks. She signed everything without contest. No negotiation, no lawyers jousting over assets. She showed up to the finalization alone, thinner, wearing no makeup. She didn't look at me. Gerald removed her from the family will. I know this because Diane called me 3 weeks after it was finalized, sobbing into the phone. She said Marco had relapsed. She said Renee was still with him. She said she didn't understand how her daughter, her brilliant, sharp, capable daughter, could throw away everything for a man who couldn't stay clean for 6 consecutive months. I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. What I keep coming back to is this. Renee built an entire mythology. Cold parents, a disowned brother, a woman who'd clawed her way to freedom, and she built it so well that I married the character, not the person. Every detail measured, every tear placed. The woman I admired for her resilience was real, in a way I hadn't understood. She was times resilient. She maintained a lie across years, across a marriage, across the daily architecture of a shared life without a single crack I could see until a piece of mail arrived with the wrong name. That's not weakness. That's a kind of terrifying talent. And she spent all of it on Marco Reyes, a man who the last I heard was sleeping on someone's floor. I think about that sometimes. How the sharpest person I've ever known made the dumbest choice I've ever seen and made it over and over and over again and called it love. My husband ordered a paternity test on our son. Not because he had doubts, because his mommy told him to. And that right there is the sentence that ended my marriage. So here's the short version. My mother-in-law spent 2 years implying my toddler wasn't her son's kid. Instead of shutting it down, my husband ordered the test to keep the peace. The results confirmed what everyone with eyes already knew. But by the time they came back, I'd already filed for divorce, found an apartment, and invited the whole family over for one last dinner they'll never forget. I'm 32. My soon-to-be ex-husband is Marcus. Our son is 2, I call him my little gremlin, and he's the only man in this story worth fighting for. Then there's Diane, my mother-in-law, the woman who turned suspicion into a sport. And Gerald, my father-in-law, who I'm pretty sure hasn't spoken a full sentence since 2019. Let me tell you about the slow death of a marriage because it didn't start with a paternity test. It started with a casserole dish. 3 weeks after our wedding, Diane showed up unannounced with a tuna casserole and a suggestion that I might want to learn Marcus's favorites before he starts eating elsewhere. She said it with a smile. She said everything with a smile. That's the thing about Diane. She never raised her voice, never cursed, never did anything that would look bad if you described it to someone else. She just eroded you, like water on limestone. Drip, drip, drip. And one day you look down and there's a canyon where your self-respect used to be. Marcus's response that night, she's just trying to help, babe. She doesn't mean anything by it. That became the refrain of my marriage. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's just old-fashioned. She's just protective. She's just worried. She's just being a mom. You know what? I was just being his wife. When I got pregnant, I made the mistake of thinking it would bring us closer. It did, just not me and Marcus. Him and Diane. She was at every appointment she could weasel her way into. She had opinions about my diet, my exercise, my decision to keep working until month 8. When I said I wanted my own mother in the delivery room, Diane didn't speak to Marcus for 11 days. 11. He counted. And on day 12, he asked me gently, carefully, like he was defusing a bomb if maybe both mothers could be there. I said fine. Because I was still saying fine back then. My gremlin came out looking exactly like Marcus. Same nose, same ridiculous ears, same dimple on the left cheek that makes you forgive them for everything. I remember Diane holding him in the hospital, studying his face like she was running forensic analysis and saying, well, he's got your complexion. She said it to me. Not to Marcus, to me. My son is lighter skinned than Marcus. That's it. That's the whole conspiracy. My son inherited more of my coloring, and Diane decided that was evidence of something. The comments started small. Who does he look like on your side? Are those your brother's eyes? Funny how genetics work, isn't it? Always in front of other people. Always light enough to sound like small talk if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. The first time I told Marcus, it bothered me. He rubbed my shoulders and said she was just an excited grandmother trying to see family resemblance. The 5th time, he sighed and said he'd talk to her. The 10th time, he snapped and told me I was being sensitive. By the 20th time, I'd stopped counting and started something worse. I'd stopped caring what he thought about it. There's a moment in every dying marriage that you can point to later and say, that's when I knew. Mine happened on a Tuesday. The gremlin was 18 months old. We were at Diane and Gerald's house for dinner. Gerald was doing what Gerald does, existing quietly in his recliner, a man so thoroughly absorbed into his wife's personality that I sometimes forgot he had one. Diane was bouncing my son on her knee, and she looked up at Marcus and said, "You know, sweetheart, you really should consider one of those DNA tests, just for peace of mind." They sell them at the pharmacy now. She said it like she was recommending a vitamin. I looked at Marcus. He was cutting his steak. His knife paused for maybe half a second. Then he kept cutting. That half-second pause. That's what killed us. Not the test. Not Diane. That pause where he considered it weighted against the cost of confronting his mother and decided the steak was more interesting. I didn't say a word in the car ride home. Marcus filled the silence himself. She's just old school, you know. In her generation, people talk like that. She doesn't mean. If you finish that sentence, I said, I will open this car door at 60 miles an hour. He didn't finish the sentence. 6 months passed. The comments didn't stop. They got braver. Diane started making them directly to me when Marcus left the room, which meant she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't confused. She wasn't old-fashioned. She was testing fences. Then came the evening Marcus sat on the edge of our bed while I was folding laundry. He had that look, the one where his jaw goes tight and he rubs the back of his neck like he's working up to something. I knew that look. It usually preceded a request to visit his parents. So I've been thinking, he said. I kept folding. Maybe we should just do the test. The DNA thing. I sat down a onesie. Slowly. Not because I think I times no times he's mine. Obviously. But if we just do it, she'll see the results and she'll stop. It'll shut her up for good. He looked at me like he'd just proposed something reasonable. Like he'd found the solution. His eyes were almost hopeful. I smiled at him. I actually smiled. Because something behind my ribs quietly snapped, and the sound it made was so clean, so final, that it felt almost like relief. Sure, I said. Order it. He blinked. Really? Really? He exhaled, shoulders dropping. Thank you. Seriously. This is going to fix everything. I picked up the onesie and kept folding. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney before my coffee was cold, and I started planning a dinner party. The test results arrived on a Thursday. I know because I'd been tracking the shipment like a woman tracking a hurricane, not because I was nervous about what it would say, but because I needed to know when to set the table. I told Marcus to invite his parents for dinner Saturday evening. He thought it was a peace offering. He actually kissed my forehead and said, "See, this is going to be good for everyone." I let him believe that. I let him believe a lot of things that week. I was warmer than I'd been in months, attentive, easy, laughing at his jokes. He probably thought we were healing. What we were doing was hospice. Saturday morning, while the gremlin napped and Marcus ran to the store for wine, I laid the divorce papers on our bed. Filed, dated, flagged with those little colored tabs the attorney uses. When he came home and went to change his shirt, I heard the bag hit the floor from the kitchen. He came downstairs holding them like they were written in a language he didn't speak. What is this? Read the tabs. I can see what it... Are you serious right now? Your parents will be here in 2 hours. I need you to ask your mother to apologize when they arrive. For all of it. Every comment, every insinuation, every time she looked at our son like he was evidence. A real apology. And then we get done with this. Marcus set the papers on the counter. His hand was shaking, but his voice went flat the way it always does when he's trying to control a room he's already lost. You're not filing for divorce over a DNA test. I'm not filing over the test, Marcus. I'm filing over you. He stared at me. I watched something rearrange behind his eyes, confusion giving way to the first real fear I'd seen on his face since the delivery room. I'm not signing these. Listen, I don't need you to sign it to get a divorce. It would only make things complicated. That's it. The doorbell rang at 6 sharp. Diane is always punctual. It's one of the few things about her I respected. She came in wearing her church pearls, which meant she considered this a formal occasion. Gerald followed in her wake, nodding at me the way he always did a man acknowledging weather. Marcus had the test results in an envelope on the dining table. He hadn't opened them. I think he wanted witnesses. We didn't even make it to the salad. Marcus opened the envelope, read it, and set it down. He's mine. Obviously. His voice cracked on the second word. Diane picked up the paper. Read it. Set it down. Her face didn't change. Not one muscle. And that's when I understood something I should have understood years ago. She had never actually believed the baby wasn't his. The accusation was never about DNA. It was about territory. It was about making sure I knew that in this family she outranked me. Marcus turned to her. Mom, you owe her an apology. Diane straightened her pearls. For what? For all of it. The comments, the suggestions. You made her feel, I have nothing to apologize for. Her voice was Sunday sermon steady. I wouldn't apologize for having suspicions. I didn't accuse her of anything. She looked at me then. Directly. The way she always looked at me when Marcus left the room, except this time she didn't bother waiting for him to leave. And you can leave if you want to. So that's that. Gerald studied his hands. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The gremlin babbled from his high chair, smacking a spoon against the tray, the only person in the room who didn't understand what was collapsing. I stood up, calmly, picked up my son, went upstairs and started packing a bag. I could hear them below. Marcus's voice rising for the first time in his life, not at me, not for me, but because the floor had finally dropped out and he was grabbing at whatever was closest. He eventually told his parents he'll be coming over from time to check up on them. He is their only child. And not to bother coming over anymore until she apologizes. She wasn't amused. She told me called it up the stairs because Diana's always had excellent projection that I'm taking her son away and that some female prostitute would replace me and raise my child. She used the word times, prostitute times, like she was ordering from a menu. I zipped the bag. I left that night because I wasn't going to get an apology. And Marcus didn't seem to understand that him reinforcing for years that it's okay for her to meddle is why I wanted a divorce in the first place. The test was just the last strip. The canyon was already there. It took Marcus 9 days to call about couples counseling. Not because he had some revelation about what kind of husband he'd been. Not because he suddenly saw me clearly. He called because he'd spent 9 days in a house without the gremlin's morning babbling, without the weight of a small body falling asleep on his chest, and the silence broke him in a way I never could. I said yes. Not because I believe it'll work, but because I believe in being thorough, and when the gremlin is old enough to ask why, I want to say I tried everything. The counselor asked me in our first session what I wanted from Marcus. Respect, I said. And if he shows you that I thought about it. Really thought about it? Searched every room inside myself for the part that used to love him. The part that said time's fine, time's to everything. The part that folded his laundry while her heart was being autopsied. Then I'll feel it, or I won't. The divorce takes 20 days if I need it to. I'm on day 14. The clock is running, and for the first time in this marriage, I'm the one deciding what happens when it stops.
We always called ourselves a close-knit family. It's a nice phrase, isn't it? Sounds warm. What it really means is that we're all up in each other's business all the time. There are no secrets, only delays and the inevitable group text explosion. So when my brother Robert first brought Rebecca home for Sunday dinner, the jury was in. Before she'd even taken her coat off. She was loud. Not just her voice, which had a laugh that could shatter glass, but everything about her. Her dress was a little too tight. Her lipstick a little too red. She told a story about getting a flat tire that involved more curse words than I'd heard my mother use in her entire life. My older sister Amy just sat there smiling a smile so tight. It looked painful, her fork frozen over a piece of roast chicken. After they left, the debrief began. Well, Amy said, draining her wine glass. She's energetic. She's crude Amy, my mother's side, already gathering plates. That story was completely inappropriate for the dinner table. Her background is just very different from ours, dear. My father added his classic diplomatic way of saying he didn't approve. I stayed quiet mostly. But I agreed. Robert had always been the quiet one, the steady one. Rebecca was a firecracker, and I worried he was going to get burned. I figured it was a phase, a rebellion. He'd get it out of his system and find someone more suitable. Someone who understood the unspoken rules of a family like ours. We all thought that. We tolerated Rebecca because we were sure she was temporary. But months bled into a year. The phase was looking suspiciously permanent. Robert started missing Sunday dinners. First it was an excuse about work, then a friend's birthday. We all knew he was with her. The pressure started to mount, mostly from Amy, who appointed herself the family enforcer. Have you talked to him? She'd ask me on the phone at least once a week. Does he not see how embarrassing she is? Did you know she posted a picture of them on vacation and she was wearing a thong bikini? A times thong times Brian. My colleagues can see that. I'll talk to him, Amy. I'd say, just to get her off the phone. And I did. I tried to be the good brother, the reasonable one. I'd catch him for a beer, just the two of us. Look, Rob, I said one night, swirling my drink. You know, I just want you to be happy. But you have to admit Rebecca isn't exactly subtle. The way she dresses, the way she talks. It's a lot for Mom and Dad. Robert's jaw tightened. She's a good person, Brian. She's fun. She makes me happy. Isn't that enough? Of course. But family is important too. You can't just pretend our values don't matter. It's about respect. Respect? He let out a short, bitter laugh. You mean conformity? You mean not doing anything that might make Amy clutch her pearls? That stung because it was partly true. But he was missing the point. It wasn't about being snobs. It was about protecting our family's reputation. About maintaining a certain standard. Rebecca didn't just fail to meet that standard. She took a sledgehammer to it. The breaking point for me was Christmas. The whole extended family gets together at my parents' house every year. It's a command performance. A few weeks before, Robert called me. Hey, I need a favor, he said, his voice low. I told Mom and Dad I'm going to Europe with some friends over the holidays. Europe? What friends? I asked. There was a long pause. It's not friends. I'm going to spend Christmas with Rebecca's family. In Ohio. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Ohio. He was lying to our parents to go to Ohio for times her asterisk. Rob, you can't do that, I said. Just tell them the truth. Are you kidding me? After the lecture Amy gave me last week about Rebecca's lack of decorum, they'd have a fit. It would ruin Christmas. This is just easier, Brian. Please. Just back me up. He sounded desperate. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I hated lying to my parents, but I hated the idea of the inevitable family meltdown even more. So I played along. I listened to my mom talk about how wonderful it was that Robert was getting to see Europe, how cultured he was becoming. I nodded and smiled while feeling like a complete fraud. Amy, of course, was suspicious from the start. She'd cross-examined me, trying to poke holes in the story. Which friends is he going with again? Did he say which cities they're visiting? The whole thing felt dirty. He was building a secret life, walling us out and letting Rebecca in. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about his dishonesty. His choice to deceive us rather than face us. It felt like a betrayal. After the holidays, things were tense. Robert was distant. The few times we did talk, it was stilted and awkward. The lie hung in the air between us. The rest of the family felt it too. There was a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather. Then 2 weeks ago, Robert sent a message to the family group chat, me, him, Amy, and our younger sister Krista. Asterisk Robert, hey. Can we all hop on a group call? Sunday evening. Got something I want to talk to you all about. Asterisk. Amy responded instantly. Asterisk. Amy. Is everything okay? Asterisk. Asterisk Robert, everything's great. Just want to catch up. Asterisk. My phone buzzed with a private text from Amy a second later. Asterisk Amy, it's about her. I know it is. He's going to say they're moving in together. Asterisk. I typed back. Asterisk me probably. Just stay calm. Let him talk. Asterisk. Asterisk Amy calm, he's been lying to us for months. He's choosing that trashy woman over his own family. I will not be calm. Asterisk. I didn't respond. For the rest of the week, a sense of dread built in my chest. This wasn't just a catch-up. This was a reckoning. Sunday evening rolled around, and I poured myself a stiff whiskey, setting the glass down next to my laptop. My screen lit up. A video call notification. It was from Robert. My stomach clenched. I took a deep breath, a gulp of whiskey, and clicked accept. Amy's face, red and contorted with fury, vanished from my screen, replaced by the generic gray icon of a dropped call. The silence she left behind was heavy charged. It was just me and Robert, now his face pale and pixelated in the glow of his monitor. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders slumped. He took a shaky breath. Brian, he said. His voice quiet, vulnerable. You still there? I'm here, I said. My own voice sounded flat, distant. The whiskey wasn't helping. Look, I know Amy's pissed. She'll come around. She always does. He was trying to convince himself, not me. But what do you think I was going to tell Mom and Dad at the annual garden party next month? The whole family will be there. I thought, maybe if everyone is there, they'll have to be civil about it. I stared at him. The naivety of it was staggering. He wanted to drop this bomb in the middle of my mother's prized petunias in front of 60 of their closest friends and business associates. You want my advice? I asked, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. Yes, Brian. That's why I called. I need my brother. The words should have meant something. They should have landed. But all I felt was a cold, hard annoyance. He hadn't consulted us. He hadn't thought about the consequences. He hadn't considered anyone but himself and Rebecca. My advice is don't. I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. Do not announce your engagement at that party. Robert recoiled as if I'd slapped him. What? Why not? Because it would cause a significant embarrassment for Mom and Dad. For all of us. The word hung in the air between our two little video windows. Asterisk embarrassment, asterisk. His face hardened, the vulnerability vanishing, replaced by a familiar defensive anger. Embarrassment. Marrying the woman I love is in times embarrassment times to you. Don't be dramatic, Rob. You know exactly what I mean. Announcing it like that, in public with her standing there, it's forcing their hand. It's an ambush. You can't do that to them. An ambush. I'm telling my family that I'm happy. His voice cracked with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. I thought out of everyone you would get it. I thought you'd at least have my back. A wave of frustration washed over me. He just wasn't getting it. He was so lost in his little love story he couldn't see the bigger picture. Someone has to give you a reality check. Robert, I said, my tone sharpening. You can't just drop a bomb like this and expect everyone to throw you a parade. You lied about Christmas. You've been hiding your relationship for months. And now you expect us to just smile and applaud while you detonate the family's reputation at their biggest social event of the year. Wake up. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The silence stretched. I saw something in his eyes shut off a light going out. He had come to me for a lifeline, and I had handed him an anchor. I see, he said finally, his voice devoid of all emotion. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the reality check, Brian. It's been illuminating. He ended the call. My screen went blank. I was alone in my quiet apartment, the only sound the clinking of ice in my glass. I finished the whiskey in one long swallow, the burn doing nothing to quell the knot in my stomach. I told myself it was for his own good. He was being reckless. I was being the responsible older brother. But the image of his face, that flicker of hope extinguishing in his eyes, wouldn't leave my mind. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Not Amy, she'd just pour gasoline on the fire. I scrolled through my contacts and hit the call button for Krista. She answered on the second ring. Let me guess, she said, her voice calm and even. Apocalypse, Amy. You have no idea, I sighed, pacing around my living room. And Robert? He's engaged to her. To Rebecca. There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background on her end. Wow, she said, drawing the word out. Engaged. So it's official. He wanted to announce it at Mom and Dad's garden party. Krista let out a low whistle. Oof. Bad move. That's what I told him. I said it would be a huge embarrassment for them. Relief washed over me. See, I wasn't the villain. Krista the measured won the family's Switzerland. She got it. Well, you're not wrong, she said. Announcing it there feels deliberate. Like he's trying to force their hand, make a scene. It's a power play. Exactly. Thank you. He just doesn't see it. He sees what he wants to see, Krista said. But Brian, you know what this means, right? You know what Dad is going to do. I stopped pacing. What do you mean? The money, she said simply. He'll cut him off. The trust fund, the annual supplement, any help with the down payment for a house. It'll all be gone. Dad's not going to finance a life with someone he thinks is a gold-digging nightmare. The thought was so obvious I was angry I hadn't considered it myself. It was the family's ultimate weapon. The final backstop against any decision they deemed unacceptable. He wouldn't, I said, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. He absolutely would, Krista countered. And honestly, maybe it's a good thing. A test. A test. Yeah. To see if she's really in it for him or for the lifestyle. If she sticks around after Dad turns off the tap, then maybe Robert is right about her. If she bolts well, he dodged a bullet. She framed it so pragmatically, so logically. It wasn't a punishment. It was a test of character. A necessary evil to protect my brother from a manipulative woman. It was a perfect, clean narrative. One where we weren't the bad guys. My hands were tied. I couldn't stop what was coming. All I could do was try to manage it. "You're right," I said, my resolve hardening. "He needs to know that's on the table before he does anything stupid." "Good luck being the one to tell him," Krista said. There was no sympathy in her voice, just a statement of fact. We hung up a few minutes later. I stood in the middle of my living room, the empty whiskey glass still in my hand. My role was clear now. I wasn't betraying my brother. I was protecting him. From himself, from her, from the inevitable fallout he was too blind to see coming. I was the only one who could guide him through this, to help him manage Mom and Dad's disapproval in a way that might salvage his future. I pulled out my phone again, my thumb hovering over Robert's name. I would call him in the morning. I'd lay it all out for him, the financial consequences, the reality of his situation. I'd advise him on the smartest way to proceed. It was the right thing to do. It was what a good brother would do. My grandmother is a viper in a cardigan. For my entire life, she's used words like weapons, honing in on the softest parts of people and striking without hesitation. She saves the worst of her venom for me. My brother Mark died in a car accident when he was 19. At his funeral, while I was sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, she cornered me by the casket. She patted my hand, a fake pitying look on her face, and whispered, "It's a shame God took the good one." I was 15. I couldn't even process the cruelty. I just stood there paralyzed. Years later, my husband and I lost our first child, a daughter we named Lily, who was stillborn. It was the single most devastating event of my life. A week after we buried her, my grandmother called. There was no sympathy. Just a cold, analytical question. "Well, are you going to try again, or are you just broken?" That was it. That was the moment the switch flipped. The part of me that had always made excuses for her, she's from a different generation, she doesn't know what she's saying, it just died. I hung up the phone and made a decision. I was done. I went full no contact. Not the dramatic announcement-making kind. The quiet, ice-cold kind. At the next family Christmas, I walked past her like she was a piece of furniture. I didn't say hello. I didn't make eye contact. When she tried to speak to me, I turned to my mother and asked her to pass the potatoes. The silence at that end of the table was so thick you could have carved it. She didn't like being ignored. A queen needs her court, and one of her subjects refusing to bow was an act of treason. First, she sent in the flying monkeys, my cousins Jessica and David. They were her golden grandchildren, the ones who could do no wrong. They caught me at my nephew's birthday party. Janice Jessica started all fake concern. "Grandma is really hurting. You're breaking her heart." "Is she?" I said, not looking up from wrapping a gift. David jumped in, more aggressive. "You're being selfish. She's an old woman. You need to get over whatever little grudge you're holding on to and show some respect." I finally looked at him. Respect is earned, David. And she spent 30 years burning that bridge. I'm just refusing to let her rebuild it on my property. I handed the gift to my sister-in-law and walked away. When the guilt trips failed, my grandmother escalated. My phone rang late one night. It was my aunt, my grandmother's staunchest defender, sobbing hysterically. "It's Grandma," she wailed. She collapsed. "We're at the hospital. She's asking for you, Janice." The doctors don't know if she's going to make it. The old me would have dropped everything overcome with guilt and raced to the hospital. The new me was suspicious. Which hospital? I asked, my voice flat. She told me. Okay, I said. I'm calling the nurse's station on her floor to get an update directly. I'll call you back. The line went dead quiet. Then a sputtering. Why would you do that? Just get down here. Because I don't believe you, I said and hung up. I called the hospital. They had no patient by her name. Not in the year, not admitted, nowhere. I called my mom. Aunt Carol just called me sobbing. Said grandma collapsed and is at Memorial. My mom sighed. I'm looking at her right now, Janice. She's on her couch watching her game shows. Carol is in the kitchen with her, they're making tea. The sheer calculated manipulation of it all sent a shock of cold fury through me. They faked a medical emergency. They used the idea of her death as a weapon to try and drag me back into line. The family split wide open after that. Half of them, led by my aunt and my golden cousins, called me a cold-hearted bitch. The other half, led by my parents, were disgusted with my grandmother's tactics. Family gatherings became a minefield of hostile glares and whispered insults. I didn't care. The peace of not having her poison in my life was worth every bit of it. 2 years passed like this. 2 years of blessed silence. I finished my degree, pouring all that anger and frustration into my studies. I was graduating magna cum laude, and my parents decided to throw me a big BBQ to celebrate. A real party. The whole extended family was invited. I knew she'd be there, but I wasn't going to let her existence ruin my day. This was my accomplishment. The party was great. The sun was out, my friends were there. And for the first time in a long time, the family drama felt distant. My mom and dad were beaming. They brought out a cake that said "Congratulations, Janice," in bright blue icing. My favorite aunt, my dad's sister, clinked her fork against a bottle to get everyone's attention. She raised her beer. I just want to make a toast, she said, her voice full of genuine pride. To my niece, Janice. We all know how incredibly hard you've worked for this. To graduate with magna cum laude honors is just amazing, and we are all so proud of you. A chorus of hear, hear, and applause rippled through the backyard. I felt a rare, uncomplicated wave of happiness wash over me. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun and the love from the people who mattered. Then from the corner of the patio where my grandmother sat stewing in a lawn chair, a voice cut through the air like a shriek of shattering glass. Well, maybe she screamed, her voice trembling with rage, causing everyone to freeze and turn toward her. Maybe we should all show a little more respect for the ones that didn't graduate. She was staring right at me, her face a twisted mask of pure, undiluted hatred. Or for the ones who didn't waste their time and their parents' money on a useless piece of paper. The backyard went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. Every eye swiveled from her, a trembling, venomous old woman, to me. This was it. The moment she'd engineered. All the attention, all the drama pointed at her, with me as the villain of her story. The old Janice would have shrunk, cried, apologized for being happy. The new Janice just set her beer down on the picnic table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet carried further than her screaming ever could. Are you finished? I asked. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. The shock of me not immediately dissolving into tears threw her off script. I said, I repeated, my voice calm. And cold, are you finished? Or do you have more to say about how my success is an inconvenience to you? This isn't about you, she spat, recovering. This is about respect. I laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. Respect, you wouldn't know respect if it bit you. You want to talk about the people who didn't graduate? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about my grandfather, your husband, the alcoholic who couldn't hold a job. The one you defended every time he hit you, every time he hit his kids. He didn't graduate. Does he get your respect? A collective gasp went through the family. No one ever spoke about my grandfather. You are a jealous, bitter woman. I continued walking slowly toward her. Her flying monkeys, Jessica and David, started to move toward her like a Secret Service detail for a tyrant. You can't stand to see anyone happy, especially me. My joy is like poison in your veins. You tried to ruin my brother's funeral. You tried to ruin the memory of my daughter. And now you're trying to ruin this. But you're failing. Do you see? You have no more power here. I stopped a few feet from her chair. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I just saw a pathetic, empty old woman. Enjoy your cake, I said, then turned my back on her and walked away. The party died a quick, awkward death after that. My parents and my husband circled the wagons around me. But the damage was done. The air was too thick with toxicity to breathe. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. It was only the opening skirmish. 3 days later, I was at my parents' house helping my mom sort through some old photos for a scrapbook. There was a knock on the door. Mom went to answer it and I heard her voice drop. What are you all doing here? I walked into the living room and froze. There they were. The unholy trinity. My grandmother flanked by Jessica and David with my Aunt Carol bringing up the rear. They looked like they were there to perform an exorcism. We're here for an intervention, my grandmother announced, sweeping past my mother into the house as if she owned it. You need to leave, I said, my voice dangerously low. Not until you listen, David said, holding up a folded piece of paper. We've all written letters. It was so absurd I almost laughed. They ambushed me in my parents' home to read me letters about my own bad behavior. We miss the old Janice, Jessica said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. The sweet girl you used to be. The doormat, you mean, I corrected her. The girl who took the abuse and never talked back. Fine. You want an intervention? Let's have one. Who's first? David, ever the brave one, stepped forward. He unfolded his letter. Janice, he began reading in a self-important drone. We are worried about the anger you're holding on to. It's not healthy. You need to let go and learn to forgive. Family is the most important thing. I let him get about halfway through before I cut him off. David, I said, are you still 2 months behind on your child support payments to Sarah? Or is it 3 now? He stopped, his face turning beet red. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, I snapped. You're standing here reading a letter about family when you barely see your own kids. And anger. You want to talk about anger? Should I call Sarah and ask her about the hole you punched in her wall? The one that finally made her leave you. Don't you dare lecture me on forgiveness. He crumpled the letter in his fist, speechless. I turned to Jessica. Your turn. Jessica, looking shaken, held up her own letter. I just think you're not seeing how much you've hurt Grandma. You should be grateful. She lets you live your life. Grateful. I laughed again, that same ugly sound. Jessica, you're 34 years old and your husband still gives you an allowance. Because you can't be trusted with a credit card. You haven't paid a bill on your own in your entire life. You and David live off of her money, so of course you defend her. You're not her grandchildren. You're her employees. Your job is to enable her cruelty, and you're both very good at it. Jessica burst into tears. Aunt Carol rushed to her side, glaring at me. How could you be so cruel? Now times is funny coming from you, I said, turning my full attention to her. The woman who called me sobbing, pretending my grandmother was dying in a hospital. You used the idea of her death to manipulate me. You are the most two-faced, spineless person I have ever met. You've spent your entire life cleaning up her messes and making excuses for her and for what a little bit of her approval that she'll never give you. You're pathetic. Then I turned to the Viper in the cardigan. She stood there silent, her face a mask of stone-cold fury. All her soldiers were wounded, their little paper swords lying useless on the floor. And you, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You talk about the ones we've lost. You used Mark against me. You used my daughter against me. You are a cancer. You are a black hole of misery that tries to suck everyone into it. You talk about missing the old me. Well, I'm glad she's gone. She died so I could live. I took a step closer. When Lily died, a part of me died with her. But the part that loved you, the part that made excuses for you, the part that saw you as my grandmother, it died too. As far as I'm concerned, I buried you both on the same day. You are dead to me. Just then the front door opened again. My dad walked in holding a bag of groceries. He stopped dead, taking in the scene, me standing like a general over a battlefield, my cousins in tears, my aunt sputtering, and my grandmother looking like she was about to have a genuine medical emergency this time. My mom just looked at him and said, "They came for an intervention." My dad's face hardened. He dropped the grocery bag on the floor. "Get out," he said, his voice a low growl I'd only heard a handful of times in my life. "We were just trying to help Janice," Aunt Carol wailed. "Out," he roared, pointing to the door. "All of you, get out of my house. Now." They scrambled. They practically fell over each other, trying to get out the door, a pathetic, sniveling retreat. My dad slammed the door behind them so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Are you okay?" I nodded, a slow, deep breath leaving my body. "Yeah, Dad. I am." And for the first time, it was the absolute truth. My mom wrapped me in a hug. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. That night, I blocked their numbers. All of them. I blocked them on social media. I systematically erased every digital path they had to me. The next day, I called my dad's sister, the aunt who had toasted me at the party. I told her everything. Every last ugly detail of the ambush. The news spread through the family like wildfire. The story of the faked hospital visit, which had been a rumor, was now a confirmed fact. The story of the intervention painted them not as concerned relatives, but as a gang of bullies. The tide turned. People who had been neutral were now firmly on our side. My grandmother, for the first time in her life, found herself isolated. Her phone calls went unanswered. Her power built on a lifetime of fear and manipulation crumbled to dust because I had simply refused to play her game anymore. I felt nothing. No guilt. No remorse. No sadness. Just a quiet, clean, and beautiful emptiness where all that toxicity used to be. The war was over. I had won. The last thing I did before leaving for my work trip was check the new gate lock. It was a beast, a heavy-duty deadbolt that clicked shut with the satisfying finality of a bank vault. The fence was 8 feet of solid black aluminum, perfectly code-compliant, and I thought perfectly teenager-proof. The pool shimmered a pristine turquoise jewel I'd sunk half my savings into. My own private oasis. 2 weeks in Chicago for a conference, and then I'd be back to enjoy it. I should have known it was too good to be true. The moment my car pulled into the driveway, 2 weeks later I felt it. A knot in my stomach. The side gate, the one with the brand new lock, was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just enough to scream that something was wrong. I dropped my suitcase on the gravel and walked over. The deadbolt wasn't picked. It was destroyed. The metal around it was warped and splintered like someone had taken a crowbar to it. My backyard looked like a hurricane had hit a frat house. Red Solo cups and beer cans littered the grass, some floating like little plastic buoys in my once pristine pool. A lawn chair was overturned, one of its legs snapped clean off. Cigarette butts were ground into the new patio stones. Someone had even thrown a half-eaten hot dog into one of the skimmers. The whole place reeked of stale beer and chlorine. Rage, cold and sharp, went through me. I didn't even clean up. I walked straight inside, went to my office, and pulled up the security feed on my desktop. The system had 4 HD cameras, all motion activated. The files were all their timestamp. I clicked play on the first one from 5 nights ago. It was like watching a nature documentary, except the animals were a pack of local high schoolers. The first 2 lanky kids in hoodies spent 10 minutes prying at the gate before it finally gave way. Then the floodgates opened. Over 20 of them poured into my yard like it was a public water park. I watched for an hour, fast-forwarding through the grainy nighttime footage. I saw every face. I saw the kid who broke my lawn chair by trying to do a backflip off it. I saw the girl who laughed as she flicked her cigarette into the pool. I saw them all clear as day, their smug, entitled faces illuminated by the pool lights I'd paid a fortune to install. I saved the clips to a thumb drive. I had them. The next morning, I walked into the police station. The town is small, the kind of place where the police mostly deal with parking tickets and lost dogs. The officer at the desk, a guy named Miller with a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform, looked bored before I even opened my mouth. "Can I help you?" he sighed. "I need to file a report," I said, placing the thumb drive on the counter. "Breaking and entering, vandalism, trespassing." Miller picked up the drive and dangled it between his fingers. "Okay. What happened?" I laid it all out. The 2-week trip, the broken lock, the trashed yard, the pool. "It's all on there," I said, pointing to the drive. "HD video. You can see every one of their faces." He didn't seem impressed. He leaned back in his chair, which groaned in protest. "Look, kids do stupid things. They probably saw the new pool and got carried away. You sure you want to make a big deal out of this?" I stared at him. "A big deal? They did thousands of dollars in damage and broke into my property. Yes, I want to make a big deal out of it." "That's your job." His eyes narrowed. "My job is to keep the peace. Dragging 20 kids and their families through the mud over a pool party isn't exactly keeping the peace." "Just watch the video," I said, my voice tight. "Then do your job." He sighed again, a long theatrical exhale. "Fine. Leave it here. We'll take a look when we get a chance." A week went by. Nothing. I called and was told Officer Miller was looking into it. Another week. I called again. Miller was out on patrol. I left a message. He didn't call back. The message was clear they were going to bury this. My trashed yard was cleaned up, the pool filter was fixed, but the anger was still simmering. I was being stonewalled. In my own town. I walked back into the station 2 weeks to the day after I dropped off the evidence. Miller was at the same desk, sipping a coffee. He looked up and the briefest flicker of annoyance crossed his face before he smoothed it over. Austin, right? We're still investigating, he said before I could speak. No, you're not, I said, keeping my voice level. You haven't done a thing. You haven't called me. You haven't identified a single person from that crystal clear video I gave you. These things take time. I'm done waiting. I leaned forward, planting my hands on his desk. Here's the deal, Officer Miller. Either you start making arrests by the end of this week, or my lawyer is going to file a lawsuit against this department for dereliction of duty. And trust me, he'll be very interested in seeing that video too. The color drained from his face. The word lawsuit hangs different in a small town. It's a threat that echoes. He held up his hands. Okay. Calm down. There's no need for that. Let me make some calls. I walked out of there, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. It was a bluff. I didn't have a lawyer, but it had worked. And then for another week's silence. I was about to make good on my threat, find a lawyer in the city, when my phone finally rang. It was an unknown number. This is Officer Miller. His voice was flat, all the folksy charm gone. Finally, I said, "So you have some names for me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. "We've identified a few of them, Austin," he said, slowly, his voice dropping to a low conspiratorial tone. "But look, before we proceed, you need to understand something." Understand what? Another pause. "The thing is," he said, his voice heavy, with warning, "there are some names on this list. Important names. You might want to seriously reconsider how far you want to take this." Important names. I laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. What the hell is that supposed to mean, Miller? Is this town so broken that some last names are get out of jail free cards? "I'm just telling you how it is," he said, his voice a low rumble. "These aren't just any kids. Their parents are involved in the community. You push this, it's going to get messy. For you." The threat hung in the air, thick and greasy. It wasn't about justice anymore. It was about who knew who. I don't care if the governor's son was doing cannonballs into my pool, Miller. They broke the law. File the charges. That's an order from a citizen and a taxpayer. Do your job. I hung up before he could answer. The first volley didn't come from the police. It came from my own girlfriend, Sarah. She showed up that evening with a bottle of wine and a worried look on her face. "I ran into Carol Ann downtown," she said, avoiding my eyes as she uncorked the wine. Carol Ann was the town's biggest gossip. "She said you're trying to press charges against half the high school." "I'm pressing charges against the 21 individuals who broke into my house and caused $5,000 in damages," I corrected. She finally looked at me, her expression pained. "Austin, they're kids. They did a stupid thing. Are you really going to brand them all as criminals? Ruin their chances at college, their futures over a dumb party? They broke my gate with a crowbar. Sarah. They trashed my property. The dumb party was a crime. What am I supposed to do? Send them a thank you note? You're supposed to be the adult, she said, her voice rising. You could just talk to the parents, make them pay for the damages. Why do you have to be such a bully about it? It's just a pool. The word bully landed like a punch to the gut. A bully? I'm the victim here. Are you? She shot back. Or are you a guy with a new pool who can't stand that some kids had fun in it without your permission? I stared at her, speechless. It was like I was speaking a different language. We didn't resolve it. She left the full wine bottle on the counter and walked out. The next call was from my mother. Her voice was pure weaponized guilt. Austin, honey, I heard what's happening. Mrs. Gable from the church group called me. Her grandson was there. She's worried sick. You know these families, we have to live here. Please, for my sake, just let this go. Even my best friend Mark cornered me at our usual spot for a beer. Dude, I get it. You're pissed. But you're going up against the whole town on this. Is this the hill you really want to die on? It felt like the walls were closing in. Every conversation was the same. I wasn't the victim. I was the villain. The unreasonable asshole making a mountain out of a molehill. I felt totally, utterly alone. It was me against everyone. That night, unable to sleep, I did what any desperate person does. I went online. I found a generic legal advice forum, created a temporary account, and laid out the whole story, stripping out names and locations. The break-in, the video, the damage, the police stonewalling, the pressure from family and friends. I hit post and watched the screen, expecting to be called an asshole there too. The comments trickled in. Most were supportive. NTA. Your property, your rules. Call a lawyer and the local news. But then one comment stopped me cold. Asterisk user. Small Town Blues wrote, I guarantee the cops aren't lazy. They're scared. There's a big fish in that group of kids. Mayor's kid, police chief's nephew, something like that. They're not protecting the kids, they're protecting their own jobs. Find out who they are. That's your leverage. Asterisk. The words clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Miller's warning about important names. The coordinated town-wide pressure. It wasn't a random social phenomenon. It was a defense mechanism. The next day, I got a text from a guy I knew from high school, Kevin. He worked for a pool maintenance company, the one I'd hired to fix the filter. Asterisk, hey man, can we talk off the record? Asterisk, we met at a coffee shop in the next town over. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Look, Austin, I shouldn't be doing this, he started, his voice low. But my boss showed me your security footage to identify what kind of crap was in the skimmer. I saw the kids. I leaned forward. And he took a deep breath. You know Mayor Jenkins' daughter, Ashley. She's the one who was flicking cigarettes into the pool. And the kid who did the backflip off your chair and broke it. That's Jason Thompson. Judge Thompson's kid. It's a who's who of this town's country club roster. There it was. The ugly, simple truth. I wasn't fighting a bunch of delinquent teens. I was fighting the town's power structure. Pressing charges wasn't just ruining the kids' futures. It was threatening their parents. And in a town this small, people like that don't forgive. They don't forget. They get even. My business permits, my property taxes, simple traffic stops, my life could become a bureaucratic nightmare. I'd be a permanent outsider in my own home. I went home, my anger replaced by something colder. A clear, hard sense of strategy. I couldn't win a public war, but I could still win the battle. I pulled out my phone and dialed Officer Miller. Austin. He answered, his voice wary. Have you had some time to think? I have, I said, my tone even and calm. It clearly unnerved him. I've decided to drop the request for criminal charges. I could hear the relief in his exhale. Good. That's a smart move. I'll let the families know. I'm not finished. I cut in, my voice turning to ice. I'm dropping the criminal charges on one condition. You are going to arrange a meeting with me and every single parent of every kid in that video. It will be held at my house tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Whoa, now I can't force them to. You won't have to force them, Miller. You're going to give them a choice. They can either show up at my house with a checkbook, or they can watch their little darlings on the 11 o'clock news. I sent a copy of the video to a reporter in the city this afternoon. His name is Dan Matthews. He's very interested in a story about small-town corruption and how the children of the elite are above the law. Whether he runs that story depends entirely on how my meeting goes tomorrow night. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I had him. I had all of them. The next evening, my driveway was filled with Mercedes, BMWs, and oversized SUVs. One by one, they filed into my living room, the mayor, the judge, the doctors, the business owners. They stood in awkward silence, refusing to look at me, their faces a mask of resentment and humiliation. I stood before them, a single sheet of paper in my hand. Good evening, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. There's no need for introductions. I have an itemized list of the damages. The new deadbolt. The patio chair. The full drain and cleaning of the pool. The repair of the filtration system. Miscellaneous cleanup. And a $500 inconvenience fee for my time. The total is $6,475. I placed the invoice on the coffee table. That comes out to $309 per family. I don't care how you split it up. I just want to check for the full amount on this table before you leave. Once I have it, the matter is closed. The video disappears forever. Any questions? No one spoke. The silence was thick with what they couldn't say. After a long moment, Judge Thompson stepped forward, pulled out a checkbook, and wrote. One by one, the others followed suit, a procession of simmering, impotent rage. They didn't get justice. But I did. The first punch lands while I'm trying to watch a movie. It's not a real punch, of course. Josh doesn't have the guts for that. His weapons are words, little poison darts he lobs from the safety of the other end of the sofa. Hey, Abby. He says, his voice oozing that fake casual tone he uses when he's about to be a jackass. I don't look away from the screen. What, Josh? If you date a guy, and then you date a girl, does that mean you have to reset your body count? Or is there a separate one for each? He snickers, a wet nasally sound. My jaw tightens. My little brother Sam, who's all of 10 years old, looks up from his Lego spaceship on the floor, his brow furrowed. He doesn't get the joke, but he gets the malice. Even he can sense it. Dad, buried in his armchair, just sighs and turns the page of his newspaper. An endorsement of the silence. This is round one. The calm approach. That's not funny, Josh, I say, keeping my voice level. It's just dumb and gross. Knock it off. What, it's a legitimate question, he says, playing dumb. He leans forward, putting on a show for his audience of two. I'm just trying to understand the logistics of your lifestyle. He says lifestyle like it's a rare fungal infection. My lifestyle is none of your business. I snap, the calm already fraying. And it's definitely not your personal stand-up material. Someone's a little sensitive, he sings songs. Can't take a joke. That's his favorite line. The ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for being a bigot. If you get offended, you're the one with the problem. You're the one who's sensitive. I mute the TV and turn to face him. This is round two. The angry confrontation. It's not a joke when you do it every single day, Josh. It's harassment. Do you get that every time my friend Chloe comes over, you ask if she's my new girlfriend? Every time a guy is even mentioned, you make some stupid comment about me playing for the other team this week. It's old, it's pathetic, and I'm sick of it. He just grins, leaning back into the cushions, victorious. See, I knew I could get a reaction out of you. I look at my dad, pleading. He just lowers his newspaper. An inch, peers at us over the top, and says, "Kids, knock it off." I'm trying to read. He says it to both of us. The universal useless parental command that equates my reaction to Josh's deliberate antagonism. In his eyes, we're both just noisy children. I throw my hands up, grabbing the remote. Forget it, I'm going to my room. Running away, Josh calls after me. Typical. I slam my door, the sound rattling the frame. It doesn't feel satisfying. It feels like a defeat. I can't win with him. He's a black hole of smug teenage cruelty, and anything I throw at him, logic, anger, reason, just gets sucked in and disappears. But I can't do this alone anymore. I'm 17. I shouldn't have to fight this battle by myself in my own home. I need backup. I need a parent. Later, I find my mom in the kitchen unloading the dishwasher. The clinking of plates is a comforting, normal sound. I stand in the doorway for a moment, gathering my courage. Mom. She turns a stack of plates in her hands and gives me a tired smile. Hey, honey. Everything okay? You stormed off earlier. No. It's not okay. I walk over to the counter and lean against it. It's Josh. It's getting worse. She sighs, a mirror image of my dad's earlier sigh, and places the plates in the cupboard. What did he do this time? The question isn't sharp with concern. It's blunt with exhaustion, like she's asking about a leaky faucet. The same thing he always does, I say, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. I need her to be on my side. I need her to listen. The jokes. The comments about me being bi. He did it in front of Sam today, Mom. He doesn't stop. I've asked him, I've yelled at him, nothing works. I need you to do something. I need you to make him stop. I lay it all out there. My last best hope. I'm appealing to the highest authority in my world. The mom. The one who is supposed to protect you. She stops what she's doing and wipes her hands on a dish. Towel her back to me. For a second, I think she's actually considering it. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time she sees that I'm not just complaining about a sibling squabble. Then she turns around and her face is set in that familiar placid mask of non-commitment. It's the face that says times I don't have the energy for this. Asterisk. Abby, You know how he is, she begins, and my stomach sinks. He's a teenage boy. They say stupid things to get a rise out of people. This isn't just stupid, Mom. It's hateful. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she says, waving her hand dismissively. He doesn't hate you. He loves you. He's just pushing your buttons. The words are a punch to the gut. Asterisk. Don't be so dramatic. Asterisk. The ultimate invalidation. So I'm just supposed to let him, I ask, my voice trembling slightly. I'm just supposed to sit there while he makes these disgusting jokes about who I am. She walks over and puts her hands on my shoulders. It's meant to be a comforting gesture, but it feels like she's holding me in place. Honey, she says, her voice soft and infuriatingly reasonable. I've been telling you this since you were 5 years old and he was stealing your dolls. He's just looking for a reaction. If you get upset, you're giving him exactly what he wants. I stare at her, speechless. The air goes out of the room. It's the same line. The exact same useless, infuriating advice she's been peddling my entire life. The advice that puts all the responsibility on me, the target, and none on him, the bully. So what am I supposed to do? I whisper, the fight draining out of me. She smiles, a gentle, knowing smile that makes me want to scream. Just ignore him, she says. Pretend you can't even hear him. If he doesn't get a reaction, he'll get bored and stop. I look into her eyes, searching for something, a flicker of understanding, a hint of solidarity, and I find nothing. There's no help coming. She isn't going to parent her golden child. She's going to leave me to fend for myself, armed with the worst advice in human history. She's washing her hands of it. Of me. A strange sort of calm settles over me. It's cold and hard and clear. The hope I'd been clinging to shatters, and in its place something new and sharp begins to form. Okay. I say, my voice flat. I pull away from her hands. Okay, Mom. You're right. Her smile widens, relieved that the conflict is over. Good. See, it's not so hard. No, I say, turning to leave the kitchen. It's not hard at all. I walk up the stairs, my steps even and measured. I hear her call out from the kitchen. Dinner in 10 minutes. I don't answer. She told me to ignore him. To pretend I can't even hear him. Fine. As I head toward the dining room, a plan clicks into place, perfect and vicious. I'm going to take her advice. I'm going to follow it to the absolute letter. I am about to become the most obedient daughter she has ever had. The aroma of roasted chicken usually makes me feel warm, settled. Tonight it smelled like a stage being set. I took my seat across from Josh, and next to Sam, my face a carefully constructed mask of pleasant neutrality. My parents took their seats at either end of the table. A perfect little family tableau. Dad carved the chicken. Mom passed around the mashed potatoes. For the first few minutes, the only sounds were the scraping of forks and Sam asking for more gravy. It was almost peaceful. Too peaceful. Josh cleared his throat. Here we go. So I saw Chloe's car in the driveway yesterday. He started shoveling potatoes into his mouth. You guys studying for that big biology test? Or were you studying each other's anatomy? He looked right at me, a greasy smirk on his face, waiting for the spark. I didn't even flinch. I took a calm, deliberate sip of water, my eyes focused on the floral pattern of the wallpaper just over his left shoulder. I didn't look at him. I didn't acknowledge him. He was a ghost. He was a draft. He waited. The smirk faltered. Hello, Earth to Abby. Nothing. I picked up my fork and cut a piece of chicken. Dad grunted from behind his glass of iced tea. Mom's jaw was a little tight, but she said nothing. Josh tried again, louder this time. Hey. I'm talking to you. I turned to my 10-year-old brother. Sam, did you finish your space station? I asked, my voice bright and clear. Sam, confused but sensing a shift in the power dynamic, nodded eagerly. Almost. I just need to build the command module. Cool. Maybe you can show me after dinner. Abby, Josh said, his voice sharp with irritation. Pass the salt. The salt shaker was directly in front of my plate. I could have reached it without even leaning. Instead, I picked up the basket of dinner rolls and offered it to my dad. Dad, roll. Thanks, sweetie, he murmured, taking one. Now Josh was staring at me, his fork halfway to his mouth. The salt, he repeated, gesturing with his head. It's right there. I continued to eat serenely. I could feel my mother's eyes on me. She knew what I was doing, and she knew why. Abigail, Mom said, her voice strained. Josh asked you for the salt. I looked at her, my expression one of perfect innocent confusion. Josh. Yes, your brother, she said through gritted teeth. I glanced pointedly at Sam, who was watching this whole exchange like it was the most exciting TV show he'd ever seen. Then I looked back at Mom. My only brother is named Sam. I said, my voice level. Who are you talking about? The air in the room went still. Dad put his fork down. Josh's face was turning a splotchy red. The golden child erased from the narrative. He couldn't handle it. What the hell is wrong with you? He snarled, his voice cracking. Pass me the damn potatoes then. The bowl of mashed potatoes was also next to me. I ignored the outburst entirely, my gaze drifting toward the ceiling as if I was pondering some great cosmic mystery. Did you guys hear something? I asked the table at large, my voice laced with a saccharine faint concern. I tilted my head. Must be the wind. This old house makes the strangest noises. That was it. The final straw. The dismissal was so complete, so absolute, that it broke through his armor of smug superiority. With a roar of pure fury, Josh slammed both fists on the table. Plates jumped. Silverware rattled. Sam yelped, a thrilled little laugh escaping with the sound. You think you're so funny, Josh bellowed, his face crimson. He shoved his chair back so hard it scraped violently against the wood floor. Fine, I don't need to sit here and take this. He stormed out of the dining room, his heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. A door slammed with the force of a small explosion, and then there was silence. A thick, ringing silence. Sam let out a loud, delighted cackle before clapping a hand over his mouth when he saw Mom's face. I finally looked at her. Her expression wasn't angry. It was something far worse. It was a death glare of pure distilled resentment. I had taken her quiet, orderly world and shattered it. I had made a scene. I had forced her hand. My father put his napkin down on the table with quiet finality. That was incredibly immature, Abigail, he said, his voice low and cold. I met his disappointed gaze and held it, saying nothing. I just took another bite of chicken. It tasted like victory. Later, the summons came. Abigail, Mom called from the bottom of the stairs, her voice stripped of all warmth. Your father and I would like to see you in the living room. Now, I found them sitting side by side on the sofa, a united front. The parental firing squad. Josh was nowhere to be seen, probably being comforted in his room for the grave injustice he had suffered. "Sit down," Dad commanded, pointing to the armchair across from them. I sat. The silence stretched thick with accusation. Mom broke it first. "I have never in my life seen such a cruel and unacceptable display of behavior at the dinner table. You embarrassed your brother," Dad added, his arms crossed. "You ruined dinner for everyone. It was a childish, spiteful little game. And it was completely out of line." I listened, my expression unreadable. I let them get it all out. They went on for another minute, piling on words like disrespectful, malicious, and uncalled for. All of it aimed at me. Not a single word about the weeks, months, years of verbal darts Josh had been throwing. When they finally wound down, expecting tears or an apology, I spoke. My voice was calm, almost clinical. "I did exactly what you told me to do, Mom." She blinked, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "This afternoon in the kitchen," I said, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "I came to you. I told you I couldn't take it anymore. I begged you to make him stop. And you told me, and I quote, 'Just ignore him. Pretend you can't even hear him.'" A flicker of recognition followed by defensive anger crossed her face. "You know that's not what I meant, Abby. Don't twist my words." "I didn't twist anything," I said, the cold, hard clarity from that afternoon returning. "I followed your instructions to the letter." He said things, and I acted like I couldn't hear him. I gave him no reaction. "You said if I did that he'd get bored and stop." "You were wrong. He didn't get bored. He had a full-blown tantrum because someone finally treated him with the same level of consideration he's shown me for years none. This isn't about him right now, this is about you." Dad cut in, his voice rising. "If you had a problem with your mother's advice, you should have said something. You should have talked to us." The hypocrisy was so staggering, so utterly shameless that I almost laughed. Did I said, enunciating each word like I was speaking to a toddler. "I talked to Mom. Right before dinner. That was the conversation where she gave me the advice I just followed." They stared at me, their righteous anger deflating into baffled silence. They had no response. The logic was a closed loop, and they were trapped in it. They couldn't admit the advice was terrible because that would mean admitting they had failed. They couldn't admit they'd ignored my plea for help because that would make them the bad guys. So they just sat there, cornered by my obedience. Finally, I stood up. There was nothing left to say. The truth was laid bare on the coffee table between us. "So, let me see if I have this straight," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Josh can relentlessly mock me for who I am every single day, and the solution is for me times to just ignore it. But when I actually do ignore him, and he's the one who gets his feelings hurt times, I'm the one who's unacceptable and cruel." I looked from my mother's pale, tight face to my father's stony one. "Got it," I whispered, loud and clear. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them in the wreckage of their own making. I hadn't won the war, but I had burned the white flag they tried to hand me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I've always said there's a special kind of music to a house with 3 kids. It's not Mozart. It's more like a punk rock concert held in a hurricane. This morning's headliner was a screaming guitar solo from 7-year-old Leo, who discovered his twin sister Mia had used his blue crayon down to a nub. It was for the ocean Mia shrieked, holding up her drawing as Exhibit A. "The ocean isn't times that times blue," Leo roared back. I slid a plate of dinosaur-shaped pancakes in front of each of them. "The T-Rex will eat the first person who yells again," I said, not looking up from the stove. The house fell silent save for the sound of tiny forks scraping against plates. Santana, my 12-year-old stepdaughter, smirked from her stool at the counter. She pushed a stray strand of black hair from her eyes and went back to her book, a picture of quiet maturity amidst the chaos. I placed a perfectly circular non-dino pancake in front of her. She looked up, her dark eyes a perfect echo of her mother's. "Thanks, Greg." "Anytime, kiddo." For the past 7 years, this was my life. I was the master of ceremonies for our chaotic circus. I packed the lunches, I drove the carpools. I kissed the scraped knees, I deciphered the hieroglyphics they called homework. I was the stay-at-home dad. And to Santana, I was I was the guy who was always there. The one who taught her how to ride a bike after her dad Mark canceled for the 3rd time. The one who stayed up until midnight helping her finish a diorama of the solar system. My wife Sarah called me the glue. I just felt like a guy who loved his kids. All 3 of them. My phone buzzed on the counter. The name flashing on the screen made my jaw tighten instinctively. Asterisk. Mark asterisk. I hit speakerphone. "Hey Mark. What's up? Just confirming for this weekend." His voice boomed slick and a little too loud, like a used car salesman's. "I'll grab her from school Friday, you can get her Sunday." "Sounds good," I said, flipping the last pancake. Santana didn't look up from her book, but I saw her shoulders tense. She hated these calls. "Great. Just tell Sarah to text me Sunday morning," he said. "Don't want the nanny showing up before I've had my coffee." There it was. The jab. The little verbal shiv he'd been sliding between my ribs for years. Asterisk nanny asterisk. I glanced at Santana. Her eyes were glued to the page, her knuckles white around the book's spine. I took a breath, the familiar mix of anger and resignation washing over me. Sarah and I had a standing policy. Don't engage. Don't give him the fight he wants. It's not worth the stress on Santana. "Will do," I said, my voice flat. "Talk to you then." I hung up before he could say anything else. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. "More syrup?" I asked Santana, my voice a little too cheerful. She just shook her head. Her appetite gone. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I was washing the last of the dinner dishes when Sarah wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. She rested her chin on my shoulder. "He called today," I said, scrubbing a stubborn bit of dried cheese off a plate. "Let me guess," she sighed. "The nanny is scheduled for a pickup on Sunday." "You know it." She squeezed me tighter. "I hate him. I hate that he does that to you." "It's fine," I lied. "It's just a word." "It's not just a word, Greg. It's meant to diminish you. To pretend you're not her father in every way that actually matters." She pulled away and leaned against the counter, her face etched with frustration. 7 years. 7 years you've been here every single day. He swoops in for 48 hours a month and acts like he's dad of the year and you're the hired help. "It's for Santana," I said, repeating the mantra we'd adopted. "We keep the peace for Santana." She nodded, but the fight in her eyes didn't fade. "I know. It just sucks." Sunday morning, the storm hit. Not outside, but inside our house. I woke up to find Sarah shivering under a mountain of blankets, her face pale and beaded with sweat. "I think I have the flu," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. My whole body feels like it got hit by a truck. I felt her forehead. She was burning up. "Okay, stay put. I'll handle the kids." I spent the morning in a frantic shuffle of taking temperatures, making toast, and keeping the twins from staging a WWE match in the living room. By 3 p.m., Sarah was completely down for the count, and my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Mark. On my way to drop off Tana. Be there in 30, asterisk. I typed back immediately. Greg, hey, Sarah's really sick. High fever. Any chance you could bring Santana all the way to the house, asterisk. The 3 little dots appeared, then vanished. Then appeared again. Finally, a reply. Mark can't. Have my whole family over for a barbecue. You gotta come get her. I'm at my brother's place. Asterisk. He sent an address. It was on the other side of town. My blood started to simmer. Of course. He couldn't be bothered. It was always on his terms. I looked at Sarah passed out in our bed. I couldn't leave her to go pick up Santana. And I sure as hell couldn't drag the twins on a 4-5-minute drive. I called him. When he answered, the sound of laughter and loud music in the background. "Mark, I can't leave. Sarah's really out of it, and I have the twins." "Not my problem, man." He said, his voice slick with annoyance. "You're the stay-at-home parent, right? This is what you do. Just get in the car. It's not that hard. Can you just meet me halfway? 10 minutes out of your way?" "Dude, I told you. I have family here. My dad, my uncles. Everyone's here. I'm not leaving my own party." There was a pause. "Look, just send the nanny. It'll be fine." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, fury coiling in my gut. He didn't just say it to be a jerk this time. He meant it. He genuinely saw me as an employee he could order around. "The help? Everything okay?" Sarah mumbled from the bedroom, her voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," I said, forcing the anger down. "Just a little change of plans. I have to go get Santana." I found my neighbor, a college kid named Alex, and paid him $40 to watch the twins and keep an eye on Sarah for an hour. He owed me for jump-starting his car last week, so he was happy to do it. The whole drive over, my hands were clenched on the steering wheel. I was driving into enemy territory. I'd only been to Mark's parents' house once years ago for a tense birthday party for Santana, where I was treated like a piece of furniture. This was his brother's house. His whole clan would be there. I pulled up to a loud, sprawling ranch house. Cars lined the street. The backyard was packed with people, smoke from a grill billowing over the fence. I could hear music thumping and a chorus of laughter. My stomach turned to ice. This wasn't just a pickup. This was a performance. And I was about to walk right onto his stage. I took a deep breath, the smell of cheap charcoal and grilled hot dogs filling my lungs, and pushed open the gate to the backyard. It felt like stepping through a portal into Mark's world. A dozen faces, all with some variation of his smug features, turned to look at me. The music, some generic pop country song, seemed to dip in volume. I was the alien specimen that had just landed. A man with a beer gut and a faded baseball cap, Mark's brother, I guess, paused with a pair of tongs over the grill. "Can I help you?" Before I could answer, a flash of black hair and blue denim shot across the lawn. "Greg." Santana slammed into my legs and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my t-shirt. I hugged her back, stroking her hair. The icy feeling in my stomach thawed an inch. This was real. This was what mattered. I looked up and saw Mark swaggering over a beer in his hand, and a performative grin plastered on his face. He was playing to his audience. He stopped a few feet away, raising his voice so everyone in the yard could hear. "Everyone relax," he boomed, gesturing at me with his bottle. "No need to call security. That's just the nanny." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few polite titters, a few genuine guffaws from men who looked just like him. My whole body went rigid. The familiar heat crept up my neck. But this time it felt different. It wasn't just shame or resignation. It was steel. Santana squeezed me tighter, her little body tense. She'd heard him. She'd heard the laughter. I looked over her head, my eyes locking with Mark's. I saw the triumphant glint, the petty victory he felt he'd just scored. In that moment, the mantra times "keep the peace" for Santana times shattered. Keeping the peace was letting him humiliate me in front of her. It was teaching her that this was acceptable. I gently loosened Santana's grip and kept a hand on her shoulder. I gave Mark a slow, deliberate shake of my head. Then I looked past him at the sea of curious faces. His uncles, his dad, his cousins. My voice was calm. It was level. It didn't carry an ounce of the fury boiling inside me. "I'm her stepfather, Greg," I said, making eye contact with the man at the grill, then an older woman who looked like Mark's mother. "Nice to meet you all." The silence that followed was louder than the music had ever been. It was a thick, syrupy thing that coated the entire backyard. The man at the grill froze, tongs hovering. The older woman's polite smile faltered. I could see the gears turning in their heads, connecting the dots. What am I bad? Asterisk stepfather. Stay-at-home dad. The man raising his child. Asterisk. Mark's grin evaporated. A deep blotchy red crept up his neck, flooding his face until he looked like he was about to choke. His own family was staring at him, their expressions ranging from confusion to dawning embarrassment. He had tried to score a point and had instead revealed the kind of man he was. A man who would belittle the person raising his daughter. "We should get going, kiddo," I said softly to Santana. "Mom's not feeling well." She nodded, her eyes wide, and slipped her hand into mine. We walked past Mark, who stood there like a statue, beer bottle clutched in a white-knuckled grip. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. I could feel the heat of his humiliation from 5 feet away. As we walked out the gate, I heard a woman's sharp voice, his mother's, probably, say his name in a low, disappointed tone. "Mark?" The car ride was quiet for the first 10 minutes. Santana just stared out the window, her fingers tracing patterns on the glass. I didn't push. I let her process. Finally, she spoke, her voice small. "He always calls you that." "I know," I said, my eyes on the road. "I hate it." I glanced at her. Her jaw was set, a tiny mirror of her mother's fierce expression. "Me too." "I'm glad you said it," she said, turning to look at me. "Who you are." My throat tightened. All the doubt, all the second-guessing. I was preparing for vanished. That was it. That was everything. "So am I," I said, and reached over, giving her hand a squeeze. We were home for less than an hour when my phone started buzzing violently on the kitchen counter. It was a string of texts from Mark. Asterisk Mark, what the hell was that asterisk? Asterisk Mark. You have no idea what you just did. My entire family was there. Asterisk. Asterisk Mark, you embarrassed me in my own brother's home. In front of my father. Asterisk. I read them and felt nothing but a dull thud of satisfaction. Sarah, who had stumbled out of the bedroom for water, her face still pale, read them over my shoulder. Oh, you did not, she whispered, a slow, wicked grin spreading across her face. You did. You finally did it. Before I could reply to him, she snatched the phone from my hand. Her thumbs flew across the screen. Asterisk Sarah. He didn't embarrass you, Mark. He corrected you. There's a difference. He's been raising our daughter for 7 years, while you play Dad of the Month. The fact that you call him the nanny says a hell of a lot more about you than it does about him. Grow up. Asterisk. She hit send and tossed the phone back on the counter as if it were contaminated. Another series of rapid-fire buzzes followed. Asterisk Mark. This isn't about that. It was a joke. You know that. He should have just played along. He had no right to correct me like that. Asterisk. Asterisk Mark. You think he's a saint. He just wants to replace me. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mark. He's not her father. Asterisk. I stared at the last message. 7 years of swallowed insults, of biting my tongue, of being the bigger person, all boiled down to that one sentence. He wasn't wrong, not biologically. But biology wasn't what got you up at 2 a.m. with a sick kid. It wasn't what taught them to tie their shoes or helped them sound out their first words. It wasn't what held them when their heart was broken. Sarah saw me staring at the screen, saw the flicker of old insecurity in my eyes. Don't you dare, she said, her voice soft but firm. She put her hands on my shoulders. Don't you dare let him get in your head. Do you know what you are, Greg? You're the person Santana ran to in a backyard full of his relatives. You're the person she felt safe with. You're the one who showed up. She was right. I had spent so long letting Mark define my role with a single demeaning word. I let him shrink me down because it was easier. It kept the peace. But the peace was a lie. He could text all night. He could rage and complain and play the victim to his family. But he couldn't change the truth. He could call me whatever he wanted. The nanny, the help, the other guy. It didn't matter. Santana knew who I was. And today, for the first time, I had finally acted like it. The woman I married wasn't just understanding. She was my biggest advocate. Ava loved that I was a pilot. She traced the flight paths on a globe, packed little notes in my flight bag, and texted me pictures of the dog with captions like, "Your co-pilot is waiting." She got it. The long hauls, the weird hours, the jet lag that felt like a physical weight. For 4 years, she was my perfect ground crew. Then 6 months ago, the signal was lost. It started small, like turbulence you barely notice. It was her birthday. I was supposed to have the whole week off. But a senior captain had a family emergency. They needed someone for a 4-8-hour London run. I tried to say no, I really did, but the pressure was immense. "I promise I will make it up to you," I told Ava, holding her hands. We'll do your birthday the second I'm back. Bigger and better. She'd pulled her hands away. Her smile was tight, brittle. It's fine, Wyatt. Work is work. But it wasn't fine. When I got back laden with gifts from Harrods and a reservation at the best restaurant in town, the woman who greeted me was a stranger. A cold, distant stranger who lived in my house and slept in my bed. That weekend was the beginning of the end, I just didn't know it yet. A few weeks later, I was getting ready for a short domestic flight. I just had a fresh haircut and a shave. Ava watched me from the doorway of our bathroom, her arms crossed. Getting all cleaned up, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, part of the job. Gotta look sharp. I smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Who for? I stopped, razor in hand. What? For the passengers. For the airline. What kind of question is that? You never used to care this much. You just shave and go. Now it's product. You're using product in your hair. I stared at her dumbfounded. It's pomade, Ava. I've used it for 10 years. She just shook her head and walked away, leaving the accusation hanging in the air like cheap cologne. From then on, it was a constant barrage. Every flight became a source of suspicion. My first officer, Chloe, became her primary target. Chloe's a brilliant pilot, sharp as a tack in all business. She's also a happily married mother of 2. To me, she was just my colleague. To Ava, she was the enemy. How was your flight with Times, Chloe? Times, she'd ask, emphasizing the name like it was a disease. It was fine. A little choppy over the Rockies, but we landed on time. Did she wear that perfume again? The one you said you liked? I have no idea what perfume she wears, Ava. I'm usually a little busy, flying the plane. The fights always ended the same way. She'd accuse me of being defensive, I'd accuse her of being irrational, and one of us would end up sleeping in the guest room. I was constantly exhausted, not from the flights, but from the emotional gauntlet I had to run every time I came home. I was walking on eggshells around the one person I was supposed to be able to relax with. I missed my wife. I missed the woman who would laugh at my stupid jokes and fall asleep on my chest while we watched movies. This new version of Ava was a ghost haunting our home with paranoia and resentment. I couldn't lose her. I wouldn't. Our 5th anniversary was coming up. This was it. This was my chance to pull us out of this nosedive. I needed a grand gesture, something so undeniable it would shatter this wall of suspicion she'd built between us. The plan was risky, but I was desperate. I booked a surprise 10-day trip to Bali. A private villa, infinity pool, the works. The same place she'd bookmarked on her laptop a year ago, sighing about how we'd go someday. I got the time off approved, bought the tickets, and arranged everything. The hard part, I had to pretend I forgot our anniversary. The week leading up to it was brutal. Every day she dropped hints. Can you believe it's been almost 5 years, she'd say, watching my face for any flicker of recognition? I played dumb, grunting about a flight simulator exam or a new route schedule. Each lie felt like swallowing glass, especially when I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes. But I told myself the payoff would be worth it. It had to be. On the morning of our anniversary, the silence in the house was deafening. I made coffee, and she stared into her mug like it held the secrets to the universe. I knew I had to go for the kill. I put on my uniform. Where are you going? She asked, her voice flat. Got called in. Last minute red-eye to London. I'm sorry, Aves. I'll be back tomorrow night. I braced for impact. She just laughed. A hollow, bitter sound that didn't reach her eyes. Of course you do. London. Is Chloe your co-pilot on this trip too? I don't know, I lied. Just go back to sleep. I'll call you when I land. I leaned in to kiss her goodbye. She turned her head, and my lips met her cold cheek. My heart sank. But I had to see this through. I love you, I whispered. She didn't answer. I walked out the door, my flight bag feeling heavier than ever. But I didn't go to the airport. I drove to a nearby 2-4-hour diner, the tickets to Bali burning a hole in my pocket. I ordered a black coffee and watched the clock on the wall nursing that single cup for hours. Each tick was a lifetime. I imagined her at home, hurt and angry. I felt like the biggest bastard on the planet. But I kept picturing her face when I walked back in at midnight. The anger melting into shock, then joy. It would work. It had to. At 1:14 p.m., I left the diner. I made one last stop to pick up a bottle of our favorite champagne and a bouquet of the stargazer lilies she loved. My hands were shaking as I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room casting a soft, warm glow. Good. She was probably waiting up reading a book. I crept up the walkway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I slid my key into the lock as quietly as I could, turning it with surgical precision. The door swung open into the silent house. Surprise. I started to say the word, dying in my throat. I dropped the flowers. The champagne bottle slipped from my grasp and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud, miraculously not breaking. There in the soft glow of the lamp was Ava. She was on our living room couch, and she was completely naked. Her back was to me, her head thrown back as if in pleasure. Then I heard a sound. A toilet flushing in the downstairs washroom. The door handle turned. The man who stepped out of the washroom wasn't surprised or angry or even embarrassed. He just looked inconvenienced. He was tall, obscenely handsome in a generic catalog model way, and as naked as she was. He glanced from me to the flowers on the floor to Ava scrambling for the throw blanket on the armchair. Payments on the kitchen island, he said, his voice flat and professional. He walked over to a neat pile of clothes on a dining chair and started dressing like he was in a gym locker room. My brain finally caught up. Payment. Hired. This wasn't a lover. This was a transaction. I felt a bizarre wave of relief so quickly followed by a tidal wave of disgust it almost put me on my knees. Ava had the blanket clutched to her chest. Tears were streaming down her face, but her eyes were defiant. You forgot, she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that felt rehearsed. You left me. On our anniversary. What was I supposed to do, Wyatt? Just sit here alone? I couldn't form a sentence. I held up the Bali tickets in my shaking hand. I didn't even know I was still holding them. They felt like sheets of lead. I dropped them onto the entryway table, next to her purse. The corner of the envelope pointed right at her. The man, now fully dressed, picked up an envelope from the kitchen counter without counting it. He slipped on his shoes and walked to the door, giving me a wide berth, as if I were a down power line. He didn't look at either of us again. The front door clicked shut behind him, leaving a silence that was louder than any screaming match we'd ever had. Ava's practiced anger crumbled. It was a mistake, she sobbed. Just a stupid one-time thing to hurt you because you hurt me. I was going to tell him to leave before. I swear, Wyatt. Nothing happened. I looked from her tear-streaked face to the disheveled couch cushions. I didn't believe her. More importantly, I didn't care. The next 2 weeks were a Cold War fought in a 10-by-10 therapy office, with beige walls and abstract art that looked like a Rorschach test for misery. Ava begged for us to go. I agreed, not because I wanted to save us, but because I needed a witness to the demolition. Dr. Albright was a calm woman in her 50s with kind eyes that didn't miss a thing. For 2 sessions, Ava performed her monologue. The lonely wife, the forgotten anniversary, the one-time desperate cry for attention. She cried on cue. She looked at me with pleading eyes. I just sat there, a block of ice, saying nothing. On the 3rd session, Dr. Albright leaned forward. "Ava," she said gently, "your pain over the anniversary is valid. But Wyatt, you've mentioned this disconnect began months ago. Right after your birthday." I nodded once my eyes fixed on Ava. "Ava, can you tell me about that?" the doctor asked. The mask cracked. A flicker of sheer venom crossed her face before being replaced by the familiar tears. "He left me. On my birthday. For work. For times her asterisk. Her Dr. Albright asked. Chloe. Ava spat the name. His co-pilot. He gets all dressed up for her. He comes home smelling like her perfume. He abandoned me for his little work wife." I finally spoke. My voice was rusty hollow. "Chloe is married. She has 2 kids. I don't even know what perfume she wears." "You're lying," Ava screamed, half rising from the couch. "You've been lying this whole time. I know you have. You pilots are all the same." Dr. Albright held up a hand. "Ava, let's stay on the topic. Your assumption that Wyatt was being unfaithful seems to be the root of this. Is it an assumption, or do you have proof?" Ava laughed, the same hollow, bitter sound from our anniversary morning. It scraped my nerve endings raw. "Proof," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I don't need proof." She finally looked me dead in the eye, and the stranger was back. But this time, she wasn't cold and distant. She was burning. "Fine. You want the truth. You want to know what happened on my birthday." I went out. I got drunk. And I went home with the first man who told me I was beautiful. The air left the room. Dr. Albright's pen froze over her notepad. I just stared. 6 months. It wasn't a one-time act of revenge. It was a pattern. A lifestyle. And it wasn't just him, she continued, the words spilling out like poison. "There have been others. Why not? You think I'm stupid? You think I believe you're spending all those nights in hotels around the world just sleeping? I was just leveling the playing field. I felt nothing. Not rage, not sadness. It was like watching a plane crash from 1,000 miles away. A distant, silent tragedy that had already happened. The woman I married had died 6 months ago, and I was only just now attending the funeral. I stood up. "I'm done," I said, my voice eerily calm. "We're done." I walked out of the office, leaving the 3 of them, Ava, her confession, and the stunned therapist in that sterile beige room. When her parents arrived the next afternoon, they found Ava sitting on the floor surrounded by suitcases, weeping. Her mother rushed to her side, while her father, a stern man named Robert I'd always respected, fixed me with a glare. "I cannot believe you're doing this, Wyatt," her mother, Carol, said, stroking Ava's hair. "Marriage is hard. The life of a pilot's wife is lonely. You can't just throw it away. "This is on you," Robert added, his voice low and accusatory. A man is supposed to provide, yes, but he's also supposed to be present. If you can't handle the job and the marriage, you get a new job. I stood there and took it. I let them say their piece, let them paint me as the villain, the absent husband who broke their little girl's heart. When they were finally out of breath, I looked at Robert. "She cheated on me," I said. Carol scoffed. "Oh, please. Ava told us about your anniversary. She made a foolish mistake because she was heartbroken." "No," I cut her off, my voice like steel. "Not one mistake. It started 6 months ago on her birthday. She confessed it all in front of our marriage counselor yesterday. There have been multiple men, Carol. She justified it because she assumed times I was cheating on her during my layovers." The righteous anger drained from their faces, replaced by slack-jawed horror. They both turned to look at their daughter, who was now sobbing into her hands for a completely different reason. She wasn't heartbroken. She was caught. Robert's face hardened into a mask of pure disgust. He looked at his daughter on the floor as if she were a stranger. "Get up, Ava," he said. The command was quiet, but it cracked like a whip in the silent room. "Get your things in the car." Carol just stood there speechless, her hand hovering over her daughter's shoulder before pulling it back. She wouldn't even touch her. I watched them herd her out the door like a disgraced child. I didn't help with the bags. I didn't say goodbye. The door closed and the house was finally truly quiet. I walked into the kitchen and saw the Bali tickets still sitting on the entryway table. I picked them up, walked them to the shredder, and fed them into the machine. I watched the dream of a private villa and an infinity pool turn into thin strips of meaningless paper. The only revenge I needed was a life she couldn't be a part of. The next morning, I called my lawyer. The call came on a Tuesday. I was trying to figure out why our Wi-Fi was suddenly moving at the speed of a stone sloth when my phone buzzed with Sarah's face on the screen. I answered. "He did it," she shrieked, her voice a firecracker of pure joy. "He actually did it." "It took me a second," he asked. "Yes. On a boat. With a string quartet playing that one sappy Ed Sheeran song, 'I'm Getting Married, Vin.'" I grinned. "That's awesome, Sarah. Congratulations. Put me on speaker. Is Naomi there?" I tapped the button. "You're on. Now's right here." Naomi, my girlfriend of a decade, looked up from her laptop on the couch, her brow furrowed in concern. She relaxed when she saw my smile. "Naomi," Sarah yelled. "I'm getting married." "Oh my God, Sarah, that's amazing." "Congratulations." Naomi's voice was warm, genuine. "She's always been the better person between the two of us." "Thank you. Listen, I know this is crazy and sudden, but I was thinking, would you be one of my bridesmaids?" The air in the room stilled. Naomi's eyes went wide. She and Sarah had a cordial relationship, but not a close one. They were sister and girlfriend-in-law. It was a thing. Naomi stammered. "Really?" "Yes, really," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were so incredible when Mark and I broke up. I was a wreck, and you literally brought me soup and watched terrible reality TV with me for a whole weekend. I've never forgotten that. I want you up there with me." I watched Naomi's face transform. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her lips. For years, she tried to bridge the gap with my sister to be more than just my plus one. This felt like a monumental victory. I would be honored, Sarah, she said, her voice a little shaky. Absolutely. For the next few weeks, that was all she could talk about. She bought wedding magazines. She bookmarked dress styles. She was all in. Then came the first crack. It happened on a Sunday. We were lazing around when Naomi went quiet, scrolling through her phone. I glanced over and saw it. A picture on Instagram. Sarah surrounded by 5 other women, all holding champagne flutes and little white boxes tied with silk ribbons. The caption read, "My bride tribe couldn't say I do without my crew number bridesmaid proposal." Naomi wasn't in the picture. She hadn't been invited. She closed the app and set her phone down, a carefully neutral expression on her face. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Looks like she had a little party." What the hell? I grabbed my phone and called Sarah. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless and happy. "Hey bro. What's up?" "The bridesmaid brunch, Sarah." "What was that?" There was a pause. "Oh my God, Vin, I'm so sorry. It was a totally last-minute thing. My maid of honor, Chloe, just threw it together. I was going to ask Naomi separately, you know. Do something special just for the 2 of us. This was just for the hometown girls." It sounded like grade A bullshit, but I wanted to believe her. For Naomi's sake. I relayed the excuse, adding as much sincerity as I could muster. Naomi nodded, wanting to believe it too. "That makes sense," she said, though the light in her eyes had dimmed. "It's fine, I'm just happy to be included." The special proposal never came. A couple of months passed. Wedding planning was in full chaotic swing. One night, Naomi's phone rang. It was Sarah. I could hear her frantic energy through the receiver. "Nah, thank God. The Bachelorette. I am so overwhelmed. You're like the most organized person I know. Can you help me, please?" And just like that, Naomi was pulled back in. She spent the next 2 weeks acting as Sarah's unpaid party planner. She found a killer lake house rental, created a color-coded itinerary, designed custom brides, last splash t-shirts, and even organized a payment plan through Venmo for all the other bridesmaids. She and Sarah were on the phone constantly. "You're a lifesaver now," Sarah kept saying. "I couldn't do this without you." Naomi was glowing. "I think we're finally connecting," she told me, showing me the spreadsheet she'd made. "I think she really sees me now." The Friday of the Bachelorette weekend arrived. Naomi had her bag packed, a bottle of nice tequila for the group sitting on the counter. The plan was to meet at Chloe's house at 4 p.m., to load up the cars and head out. At 3:30, Naomi texted the bridesmaid group chat, which she'd finally been added to a week prior. *** Naomi. ****. Hey ladies. So excited. Running about 10 minutes late. See you all at Chloe's soon. ***. Crickets. She frowned at her phone. That's weird. Usually someone replies instantly. At 4:15, she stood by the door with her bags, her anxiety a visible thrum under her skin. She sent another text. Naomi ****. Hey, is everything okay? I'm at Chloe's, but no one's here. Still nothing. The group chat was a dead zone. She tried calling Sarah. Straight to voicemail. She called Chloe. Voicemail. My stomach started to twist into a knot. This is messed up, I said. Just then her phone buzzed. It was a private message from one of the other bridesmaids, a girl named Jessica. ***Jessica ****. Hey Naomi. So sorry, this is super awkward. We all left this morning. Sarah said she told you the plan changed and you guys were just gonna meet us there tonight asterisk. Naomi read the text out loud, her voice flat hollow. She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She did it again. My blood went from a simmer to a rolling boil. I grabbed my phone and fired off a text to Sarah. Asterisk asterisk. Me asterisk asterisk asterisk. What the actual fuck, Sarah, you left Naomi behind. After she planned the whole goddamn thing asterisk. I tried calling. Voicemail. Naomi sank onto the couch, her packed bag slumping to the floor beside her. She didn't cry. She just stared at the wall, looking completely and utterly defeated. I don't understand why she hates me, she whispered. It was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. Hours later, around 1 a.m., my phone lit up with a reply from Sarah. Asterisk asterisk. Sarah asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk. Oh my God, Vince, stop freaking out. It was a total miscommunication. Things got crazy this morning and we left early to beat traffic. I swear I texted now. Tell her we're so sorry. And to come up tomorrow. We'll save some tequila for her XO asterisk. A lie. A pathetic, transparent lie. Naomi had checked her phone 100 times. There was no text. There was never going to be a text. After that, things got cold. Naomi politely bowed out of any further planning. She was still a bridesmaid, a title that now felt like a cruel joke. But she kept her distance. Sarah, for her part, acted like nothing had happened, all cheerful texts and exclamation points. It all came to a head at a family dinner a month before the wedding. The tension was so thick, you could have sliced it with the butter knife. My mom kept shooting me looks that said times be nice asterisk. Halfway through dessert, Sarah put her fork down, turned to Naomi, and put on her best pageant winner face. Now she began, her voice dripping with manufactured remorse. I just feel awful about the bachelorette mix-up. It was pure chaos and I was a terrible host. I want to make it up to you. Naomi stared at her, her expression unreadable. I really want you to get ready with us on the morning of the wedding, Sarah continued, her eyes wide and pleading. The whole thing. Mimosas, hair, makeup, pictures. Just us girls. It would mean the world to me. I caught Naomi's eye from across the table. I shook my head, just a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Asterisk. Don't do it. It's a trap. Asterisk. But Naomi had a limitless capacity for hope that I would never understand. She glanced from me back to my sister's earnest, smiling face. A flicker of something, a desire to believe, to finally be led in, passed over her features. She forced a small smile. Okay, Sarah, she said softly. That sounds nice. I spent the next 3 weeks watching Naomi try to manage her expectations. She didn't buy magazines or bookmark anything. She just let the invitation hang in the air, a fragile glass bird she was afraid to touch. A week before the wedding, the other shoe dropped with the dull thud of inevitability. Naomi was on the couch scrolling through the bridesmaid group chat, which had gone largely silent for her. I should probably just confirm, she said, more to herself than to me. She typed out a message, her thumb hovering over the send button. She read it aloud. Hey Sarah. So excited for next week. Just wanted to check what time I should be there for hair and makeup. And if there's anything I should bring. Sounds fine, I said, my voice tight. She sent it. We watched the three little dots appear and disappear. A minute later, a reply came in. Not in the group chat, but in a private message to Naomi. Asterisk asterisk. Sarah asterisk. Asterisk asterisk. Hey Nao. Not sure what you mean. Just come to the ceremony with Vin. Can't wait to see you guys asterisk. Naomi read it once then twice. She didn't cry. She didn't even look surprised. She just set her phone down on the coffee table with a quiet finality, the screen facing down. A hollowed-out look settled over her face. It was the look of someone who had finally stopped hoping. And that was it for me. The part of me that was trying to give my sister the benefit of the doubt, the part that was trying to keep the peace, just died. Something cold and hard took its place. The next day, I drove to the mall. In the back of my car was the wedding gift, a gleaming, ridiculously expensive stand mixer in aqua sky blue. The one Sarah had been posting on her Pinterest board for a year, the one she dropped not-so-subtle hints about every time I saw her. I walked it back into the store, slid it across the customer service counter, and told the clerk I wanted a refund. I drove home, pulled a check from my checkbook, and wrote times pay. To the order of Sarah and Mark asterisk. For the amount, I wrote exactly what the mixer cost down to the cent. I sealed it in a generic card that said best wishes. The wedding was a blur of fake smiles and polite nods. I stood for pictures. I danced with my mom. I watched Naomi navigate the day with a grace I could never possess. She congratulated my sister, hugged her even, and Sarah beamed back as if she'd just been sainted, oblivious to the chasm she'd carved between us. We left early. 3 days later, we were making pasta when my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Asterisk asterisk Sarah asterisk asterisk asterisk. Hey Vin, we're opening gifts now from the wedding. Mark and I are so confused, lol. We didn't see the mixer. Is it coming separately asterisk? I stared at the message. The sheer unadulterated entitlement of it. My thumbs moved before my brain could stop them. Asterisk asterisk. Me asterisk asterisk asterisk. I didn't know how to ask, but what happened to treating my girlfriend like a freaking human being asterisk? I hit send. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Naomi looked up from the boiling water, her eyes wide. What did you do? My phone immediately began to vibrate like a trapped hornet. It didn't stop for the next hour. A text from Sarah's new husband, Mark. Asterisk asterisk. Mark asterisk asterisk asterisk. Dude, what the hell is your problem? Sarah is in tears. Way to ruin our honeymoon. Asterisk. A text from my older brother Jason. Asterisk asterisk. Jason asterisk asterisk. Asterisk mom just called me. You need to fix this, Vin. Now. Just apologize. Asterisk. And then the matriarch herself. Asterisk. Asterisk mom. Asterisk. Asterisk asterisk Vincent. Michael, you call your sister and apologize this instant. This is supposed to be the happiest time of her life. I did not raise you to be so cruel. Asterisk. Asterisk asterisk mom. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Do you hear me? She's been through so much planning this wedding. Your girlfriend is a big girl. She can handle a little misunderstanding. You are tearing this family apart over nothing. Asterisk. over nothing. I threw my phone onto the couch. It lit up again. Sarah. Asterisk, asterisk. Sarah, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. How could you do this to me? After everything. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're using Naomi to hurt me. It's sick. Asterisk. That was the one that broke me. Jealous, I started laughing. A bitter, ugly sound that filled our small apartment. I felt like I was going to be sick. Then Naomi said, softly, putting a hand on my arm. Her touch was the only thing keeping me anchored. I shook my head, unable to speak. I just picked up my phone and showed her the thread. She read the messages, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite read. When she finished, she looked up at me. You returned the mixer, she asked. I nodded. I gave them a check. She was quiet for a long moment, just watching me. I braced myself for a lecture for her to tell me I'd gone too far, that I'd made things worse. It was a bit much, Vin, she said finally. And I felt my shoulders slump. But she stepped closer, her eyes searching mine, and a tiny, complicated smile touched her lips. I have to admit, it feels good to be seen. My phone buzzed again. My mother. I hit the power button and the screen went black. I looked at Naomi, at this incredible woman who had absorbed my sister's casual cruelty for years, always with more grace than she deserved. My family could have their honeymoon phase. They could have their drama. I knew where I stood.